in high school, I had these red shoes, and like girls would be like, "Oh, I love your shoes," and I'd be like, "Thanks, I got them in my house, landed on a witch," and then click the heels, which was extremely heterosexual of me.
So
Yeah. Hannah,
Cullen.
if you care to find me, look to the western sky. Uh,
Yeah, because you are on the West Coast.
I am on the West Coast. Yeah, I am west from you geographically. Yeah.
Yep.
It's been so long since we've recorded.
Yeah.
It
So
has,
much, so long ago that you're like, I don't even know where the record button is on this Zoom call.
yeah. I've so much has changed. Um, oh wow, we haven't even unpacked political things that have happened.
The election happened.
I went,
We're entering a new era.
yeah, I went to my first quinceañera last night.
Oh, nice.
I am at this point. I'm over the hangover drip drop or whatever. Great, recommend. It came in clutch.
Nice.
But welcome back to Not My Fantasy, the show about fantasy films and the lore that inspired them. I'm Cullen.
And I'm Hannah.
And today on our journey down the yellow brick road is Oz fan and survivor of many episodes of Glee, Jenna.
hi. That's my two biggest
Welcome.
attributes. I
You
have, I have survived a lot of Glee. A lot.
have, and you deserve credit for that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
One of my
you.
goals in 2024 was no Glee cast on my Spotify Wrapped.
I-
Do you think you're gonna
that
do
has that come out, or is that like a
No,
couple more weeks,
a
right?
couple more weeks, but anytime a Glee song comes up, I'm like, skip.
it? Skip.
You
Yeah,
know what? I'm proud of you.
thank you. Doing my best.
If there's only one song, no, if there's only two songs that are okay to hit it, let's have a Kiki Turkey Lurkey time and Christmas wrapping. Those are the only
Yes,
two songs that are okay.
I agree. We are about to hit Thanksgiving, and it is the only appropriate time to listen to Let's Have a Kiki into Turkey Lurkey time. That's it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What a ugly. Oh, yeah. As we're in an Oz era, as
Hmm.
we're holding space for the lyrics of
Mhm.
Defying Gravity, we're holding space for Oz. And Jenna is a big Oz fan, so we got connected and we're like,
Yes.
come, let's talk about one of the most iconic films of all time.
Yes.
MGM's 1939, The Wizard of Oz. We're coming to you from different stages of Dorothy's journey on the Yellow Brick Road. I'm in Munchkin Land wearing blue for Munchkins and Dorothy and green for the Emerald City.
Very
Mhm.
nice. Yeah, I'm right outside the Scarecrow. I'm wearing flannel because farms.
Yeah.
Totally planned that.
I mean, you're in Indiana. This is basically just like outside your house, right?
This is actually my backyard.
Yeah. Corn.
Yeah,
A big
literally.
lump of knobs. Yeah.
And I have my little friends here. You can kind of see them, and they're about to head into the Emerald City, which is appropriate because I can see New York City from my house. So
Oh,
this is how I
look at that.
feel living in New Jersey, looking in New York
Mm,
City.
I can
very
see Russia
cool.
from my house.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
back when things were simpler, weirdly enough.
Yeah.
Sarah Palin.
Wow.
Anyway,
Okay, so as we like try and stumble back, it's only been a few weeks, but we're like, how do we record? But yeah, we're in an Oz era. So we're doing this November. We're kind of well, probably be December-ish. We're doing a little bit of a Oz era, and then I'm sure we'll be revisiting Oz throughout the next year. But we always ask, have we seen this movie before? Hannah, have you seen the 1939 Wizard of Oz before?
I have. I think this is my first time watching it all the way through as an adult. And I also had the privilege to watch it in theaters. So my local theater, right before the early screening of Wicked that I also went to, I went to go see this. Ah, shit. I should have grabbed my stuff. Lyle, can you get the invitation that's on the fridge and the commemorative glass for me? So if you guys heard that, the showing that I went to, I like walk in the theater and they're like, "What are you here to see?" I'm like, "Wizard of Oz." Like, "Oh, okay, the theater's right down here." But before I went, someone dressed as the Cowardly Lion was like, here's your invitation to the Emerald City, and then a little commemorative glass. And it was so cute, and I was not expecting it. Um,
What?
thank you. So here's my little
Oh,
invitation. It looks just like the one that's in Wicked. It's
Yeah.
really
out.
cool. And then it says, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas
Oh
anymore.
my God.
So
Was it
Yeah.
like
yeah,
Alamo Draft House or something, or was it
I
just
think
like
it's
a
sort of like a version of Alamo Draft House. It's called Flick's
okay.
Brew House.
Okay.
But we actually are getting an Alamo Draft House here in Indy, which is cool.
Great.
But yeah, it got a very similar vibe. But yeah,
Wow.
so that was a fun little surprise. So
Yeah,
yeah, I
Flick's
got to
Brew
see it.
House, if you want an ad, hit us
There you
up. We'll
go.
do one.
Seriously, I go literally every new movie that we do on this podcast, I go there to see it because it's a certain distance away from my house. Anyway, but yeah, so that was my first time seeing it all the way through as an adult, and seeing it in theaters was crazy cool. Seeing it on a nice big screen and getting to really appreciate some of the details that I probably otherwise wouldn't have really noticed, like the makeup and costuming is just so beautiful and
Yeah.
so intricate. But yeah,
Jenna, so have you seen this one before? I don't know. It's kind of a
Few
deep cut.
times. Just a few times.
Just a few
I
times.
was thinking to myself today, I was like, how many times do I think in my life I've watched The Wizard of Oz? And I probably couldn't count. Like, I've seen this movie so many times. It's like my comfort movie. It's my mother's comfort movie. So it's very much, I don't remember the first time I saw it. I know it was probably 2 or 3 years old. Um, but I've seen this movie many times. I also saw it in theaters last year, or yeah, a year or so ago, around Mother's Day. One of the theaters in Chicago where I lived, just was like, "Hey, $5 Wizard of Oz screening." So I went and I was like super pregnant and I was very emotional and I like cried through the entire thing and
uh,
everyone thought I was a weirdo. But I've seen this film many, 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 many times. I watched it again today with my son, which was exciting. I could probably quote it from start to finish. It's very much part of my psyche.
nice.
It is, this was one of my favorite movies as a kid too. It was probably like this and Cinderella. I loved a movie
Mm.
about shoes,
Sparkly shoes.
sparkly shoes. I watched it all the time. It was one of the ones we didn't own, so it was like a special treat to get it from Blockbuster.
Hmm.
Um, I sang Somewhere Over the Rainbow a lot as a kid. I remember memories of this like family party like singing it, and this one kid wanted to like record me singing it because he's like, "You're really good," and I couldn't tell if he was like making fun of me or being serious. And so I was like, "No, you can't record me," you know. But I sing the song all the time, and I think Dorothy as a character is pretty instrumental to my personality.
Hmm.
Watching it, I realized that like she's very similar, like her and Cinderella have a similar influence on me in that like Dorothy's a little like you don't realize if she's a little feisty. Like if she thinks something's wrong or someone's being a bully, she's gonna say something. She's like, no, Uh,
Hmm.
and I think I learned that from Dorothy. And also I love red shoes. In high school, I had these red shoes, and like girls would be like, "Oh, I love your shoes," and I'd be like, "Thanks, I got them in my house, landed on a witch," and then click the heels, which was extremely heterosexual of me.
Oh, so
Yeah. Uh, and I wrote a play about an intervention for the Jiminy Cricket once, and Dorothy was a character at the intervention.
Mhm.
As well as the Scarlet Letter. I just love pointing out that she was there because like one of these things is not like the others. Yeah, but that's my relationship with Wizard of Oz. It's kind of the iconic American fairy tale though. It's like a
Mhm.
huge, like the cultural impact of this movie like cannot be overstated.
Yeah. Even like lines from the movie that I was just like, I guess I forgot that this movie kind of started like the lions and tigers and bears, oh my. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like that is like iconic. But also, again, I just like want to reiterate that like obviously they've remastered it,
Mhm.
for bigger screens and better televisions, but like it still looks and sounds really good.
Yeah,
So it's like the craftsmanship that they put into it back in the 30s, like still holds up. So it's like it's fantastic to see.
and this was before World War II, which
Yeah,
is
Yeah,
yeah,
right
crazy.
just a couple
on the
months
cusp.
later. Because they also had right before the movie played, it was Turner Classic Movies person came on, was
Mhm.
talking about like the context of the movie, and they said literally just a couple months later. And yeah, that's why it didn't get such a big boom over in Europe because World War II broke out. So
Yeah. Yeah, there's just like if I mean if we there's again so much cultural impact in trivia that like we could be on this, we could talk about that like forever.
yeah.
Um but the movie was produced by Mervyn LeRoy for MGM. Kind of after the success of Snow White. They're like we got to do a fantasy. But then people were like, we don't like fantasy. So Tales all this time like fantasy there a lot of people were like trying to write versions that were like less fantastical, which is so hilarious to think of
Yeah.
like Wizard of Oz without the fantasy. You're like, what even is that then?
Yeah.
A girl walking down a road.
Yeah.
And so many people worked on the script. There were treatments, drafts, edits, passes. It's officially credited to Noel Langley, Florence Ryerson, and Edgar Allan Wolfe. But like even like the guy who did the lyrics also changed lines. Like try and track everyone that worked on this movie. Like I had enough trouble trying to like put together the timeline of who are the directors.
Yeah.
uh, thank you to the Yale Film Archive. But it started with Norman Turog, but he was pulled for a Tom Sawyer movie during pre-production. So
Mm,
then Richard Thorpe took over for 2 weeks. But then it went to George Cukor, and he changed the vision. So Judy before was in like a blonde wig and kind of like dolled up, and like was playing more like overstated. And he was like, you know what, just be natural, just be you. And the Wicked Witch was initially an evil queen type.
mm,
And her whole look was overhauled, and that initial actress left. They brought on Margaret Hamilton. There are also concerns. The Tin Man was also recast due to health reasons, due to the makeup.
Yeah.
mm.
The original actor had like a horrible allergic reaction to something in like the silver makeup to the point where it was like he would have probably died if he had to
Hmm.
keep putting it on.
So they changed that, thankfully.
Yeah.
Victor Fleming took over from George. But he did most of the movie, but he kept George's choices. But he left for the last few weeks to do Gone with the Wind. And then King Vidor finished up the movie, mainly the stuff in Kansas.
Mm,
It kind of tracks in that this movie, I kind of love it for it, but like it doesn't really like the message and like the arc doesn't really Hondo P make sense
hmm.
in like the traditional Hollywood structure way. But I love when we watch old movies because they don't really adhere to that in the same level, and it feels kind of freeing. It's almost
Hmm.
exhausting to like save the cat, want versus need. I feel like we're just fed it so much
Hmm.
that it's
Yeah.
kind of fun just to see a story like people telling a story not totally bound by those. It stars, of course, Judy Garland as Dorothy, cultural icon. Like,
She's what, like 16 in this?
yeah,
Something like
Yeah.
that?
16. Margaret Hamilton as the Wicked Witch of the West and Myth Gulch. Frank Morgan as Professor Marvel and the Wizard of Oz, as well as the Gatekeeper, Carriage Driver, and Guard. Uh, Ray Bolger as the Scarecrow and Hunk. Bert Lahr as Zeke the Farmhand and the Cowardly Lion. Jack Haley as the Tin Man and the Farmhand Hickory, Billy Burke as Glinda, Charlie Grapevine as Uncle Henry, Clara Blandick as Aunt Em, and Terry as Toto. The dog famously had bad breath. Uh, because this movie, though, initially did not make back its $2.7 million budget until its 1949 re-release. But it became an American tradition to show it on television around Christmas time, which made it like a significant touchstone of Americana that people look forward to every year. And it kind of reminds me of It's a Wonderful Life in that way. Like
Mhm.
that movie like was not a success on its release, and Wizard of Oz was definitely considered relatively successful. Like it was well received. But it's like the re-screenings are what really like cemented it as a
Mhm.
classic. It did win Oscars for Best Score and Best Song, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Um, and there are a lot of myths and fun facts, question marks about this production. And I would check Tori from the Oz vlog to like really like because a lot of these are
Yeah.
not true, and she kind of debunks, and then she'll give you the full story, and she's like the preeminent Oz scholar online.
Helpful in our TikTok era for sure to have
Yes.
like someone who is like a scholar on the internet for it. So,
Yeah, because a lot of famous things or things that are just reshared are not true. I think whenever there's something that's like beloved, people always want to see the dark side of whatever.
Yeah.
And then a lot of them are like kind of weirdly ableist about little people, and there's just a lot. So that's why like when I was thinking of what are we going to talk about, I'm like we cannot touch on every behind the scenes thing. We'd be here forever. And
Yeah.
mhm.
I did a lot, like, I did more research than I was expecting. And, like, because people just say so many crazy things, and you're like, wait, okay, if that's true, I have to, like, I can't not mention it. So then you have to, like, look into it.
Yeah.
Um, and just one thing to touch on is that Judy Garland is kind of a tragic figure. She underwent a lot of abuse in the studio system. Some of it's very, like, harassment, comments about her body, things that are very real today, as well as the way they used drugs and medication back then. And there are stories about sexual harassment that she may have endured on set and uh, things like that. Well, extremely like not shocking to think there'd be sexual harassment on a 1930s movie set. You're like, it's also hard to verify what is true and what is not because a lot of people who are close or not close to Judy Garland are not above exploiting like her memory and the trauma
Right.
she endured
Yeah.
to kind of make trauma porn about her. So it's like,
Mhm.
well, I'm not saying, oh, there's no way she was harassed on set. It's just like I don't really want to get into those details because again, it's like it's borderline exploitative and it's hard to say like what's true and what's not. Um,
Yeah.
that's just kind of how I felt was the most
We have a
appropriate way to
good
approach
idea
it.
that it probably happened because we know the culture that she was working in.
Yeah.
So,
On a maybe more technicolor note, Oz and the LGBT rainbow thieves. Looking this up, you do hear how we stole the rainbow from God, but uh, there's often a connection between like Oz and the LGBT community, and that's actually very historically hard to identify. I always assumed it was this kind of like oh, this is because of this, but it is hard to identify and is almost folklore of itself of like when these some of these phrases and connections came into like commons parlance. Judy Garland is a gay icon, both for her strength and her vulnerability. She's very open about her struggles. And Friend of Dorothy is thought to be related to her, but some say it's actually referencing a different Dorothy and is older um, than Judy Garland. But Friend of Dorothy as a term for LGBT people. Every once in a while, I throw that one out, and people are like, "What are you talking about?" The education, open the schools.
Teach the kids. Gotta
Uh,
know.
Gotta lay some respect on Judy's name.
Exactly.
She was close with many gay men, and she knew and kind of lovingly joked about her large gay fan base. And while she isn't wasn't like Lady Gaga is now, this was a very different time. She never expressed any negativity towards her large gay fan base. Um, and there are also like articles that people were writing, making disparaging marks about like the gay men at her concerts. So it's like documented that she had a gay fan base. And her funeral was like the day before the night of the Stonewall riots. and
Hmm.
Wow.
some make a connection. Others would say these might be more unrelated, as her fan base was more white and middle class and suburban than many of the people at Stonewall. Again, it's hard to prove who's a Judy fan, who's not. Like there's a connection, maybe, and the rainbow flag. I always kind of thought the rainbow was a connection. Somewhere over the rainbow is considered a gay anthem, so that's where the rainbow flag. But Gilbert Baker, the activist artist who created the flag, he denies any connection. He took the symbol from nature. Google AI will tell you otherwise. Just a reminder not to
Yep.
use AI. It'll give you weird sexualities of Super Mario characters or untruths. So that's just my little history into Oz and LGBT rights, but that is like a lingering connection of just like connecting Oz and uh the LGBT community, LGBT plus, all the letters. But let's get into the lore, I guess, of Oz. So this is based on the 1900 novel by L. Frank Baum, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. And there was also a highly successful 1902 Broadway stage musical. A lot of that
Oh.
music is lost. Learning about it, apparently Broadway shows at that time would be 4 hours long because you didn't have cast recordings. So there'd be encores to just like perform the song again because they're like, that was a hit, but we're not gonna hear it again, so sing it
Yeah,
again.
bring it
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
And so Baum would go on, he would write 14 total Oz books, with others taking up the mantle after him, leading to 40-ish canon Oz books. I've read some of them as a kid. I'm unclear which ones I have read. I know I read Tin Woodman of Oz and Glinda of Oz for sure. I remember this character named Button Bright who he was like, I'm bright as a button, but he was really dumb. I remember that being fun. Kids kept demanding more of Baum, so he kept writing more. For a while, he'd be like, I'm done, and then be like, more. And there is a lot of progressive depictions of female characters and female power. Like it's a lot of powerful female characters. There's even a transcoded character. There's a young boy who is revealed to be the Princess Ozma hidden away in disguise. He has to shed the boy form and become a true, uh, his true self is a woman. There's also a lot of this is more funny, but like the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman emphasize a lot that like they're not made of meat is the term they use. Like you're a
Yeah,
meat boy or you're a meat girl because like they don't need to eat or sleep.
yeah. That I reread the original. I've read a bunch of them, but I just reread. I listened to the audiobook of the original book recently,
Same.
and I guess I didn't realize how much emphasis in the book is put around like when they're eating and what they're eating. And there's so much of like Dorothy had bread in her pail, but it wasn't enough. So the Tin Woodsman shook a tree and fruit came out, and the lion went into the woods and ate something we don't know. And then the Scarecrow and the Tin Man were fine. And then it'll be like the next day, we went to someone's house and then we ate this whole thing. It's just like something that reading as an adult, you're like, is that what we were concerned with? Is that Dorothy was eating? Like, should we not be concerned with everything else that's going on? Like, it's such a minor point, but I was like, why is he constantly talking about who's eating and who's not eating?
It is like it's so fun and it's what I do love about his writing is it's like fantasy before like the Tolkienization of
Hmm.
like where like we have this kind of standard fantasy that kind of becomes like the standard YA. It's like very weird. Like what he's like, there's a pumpkin guy now, and you're just like, all right. Meet the flatheads and the skeezers. They have a beef.
He has
Like
a chicken named Belina at one point.
I
Uh,
love Belina. She names all her chickens Dorothy, or her chicks Dorothy, so she just has to say Dorothy and they all come running. So now that we said all these fun things, Baum was also racist.
Mm.
oh
Now,
no.
I've seen claims that Oz was racist, and also that the book Wicked was racist, or incredibly racist. And I've recently reread Wicked. I was like, hmm. So I did a lot of research. Okay, so a lot of the claims about Baum's Oz texts being racist were not to be like with those pierce the curtains are just blue, but like they felt like stretches, like reading something into something that wasn't there. Like, yes, you could interpret it that way, but do I think we're supposed to read the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Lion as representatives of indigenous peoples?
Mm.
I just don't like I just like engaging with that text and like looking at him like I just don't think that's what he was trying to do. I feel the same about the readings of like economics and like the gold standard and silver. It's just
Yeah.
it ain't there, you know. It's not in the text. Like I think people want these like what's it called? Animal Farm like esque allegories and things, and I'm like that's
Yeah.
not what he's trying to do. In the opening prologue, he says he writes them for kids to enjoy, like fairy tales with like less morals, like just for fun.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, but in looking into was Oz racist, I learned about when Baum used to work for the Aberdeen newspaper in South Dakota. He had these short stories that featured a character that was like a racist indigenous coded character. But most damningly, he wrote an article calling for the Native American population to be exterminated,
Mm.
that lead into a lot of racist language. And a few days after, nearby was the Wounded Knee Massacre. Uh, so some tried to say he was being ironic, because so many of his other aspects seemed progressive. He had a lot of connection to the suffragette movement, you know. But it's hard to really fully 10 toes down say that he was being ironic, especially because he did not have any negative response to the massacre, and the
Mm.
atrocities committed. So it seems like he was pretty pro killing the indigenous people. And that sucks. That's pretty capital R racist. Well, the article I was reading trying to that was like trying to find racist connections in the Oz book and like attacking people who thought Oz was progressive, I thought was like one of the worst articles I've ever read. It was supposed to be academic, and I was like, this paper is really bad. I think this evidence that you can find and that his family has officially apologized for is pretty upsetting. And I couldn't just not share that,
Hmm.
even though it's a bit of a downer.
Hmm.
Um, but so when people say Oz was racist, that's kind of like, well, maybe this author was racist. And you can see how that might affect the writing, as has been happening with like J.K. Rowling and like
Mm.
reassessing her legacy.
Hmm.
Um, but what I read, at least in this book, just doesn't seem to really support that as much as maybe just the image of white Americana agriculture, peaceful, happy. Maybe that's what's connected to that. You know,
Mhm.
I don't know if I'm
Hmm.
making sense, but
Well, makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, okay, let's get to the movie. So I talked so with the books, I'll just kind of like we'll do a check-in every once in a while and I'll talk about the differences between the book and the movie. They are different. And it's, well, I guess you could say the differences are substantial. They don't feel spiritually substantial, I would say. It's more of just a changing of events, fitting it more into a movie structure. Um, but they are like they're key, so we'll discuss them. But let's open this classic. I feel like I'm doing this summary, but Jenna knows every line. So,
I do. I do. Um, yeah, I mean, where do you even want to start?
I
I guess
mean,
you
we
start
start in
in Kansas.
sepia-toned Kansas.
You guys start
Yes.
in Kansas. I mean, I mean, obviously begins with some beautiful, beautiful orchestrations. I mean, the most timeless this film, the orchestrations of this film are just so incredible.
Yeah.
So delicious to listen to, and Dorothy running away with Toto,
Hmm.
and it's revealed that Toto was her dog, obviously, was maybe harassing Miss Gulch's cat for maybe a repeated time. This might happen often. So Dorothy's just running away with Toto to try to escape back to her farm. Which she does, and she finds her aunt and uncle counting chickens because the incubator has gone bad, which I hadn't clocked that. So they're trying to basically save all of their chickens, and she is just will not stop talking about how Miss Gulch is basically threatening to kill Toto, which is obviously not great.
Setting.
But
Mhm.
they're also trying to make sure that all of their chicks do not die. So immediately, Dorothy's really on their last nerve. So
Yeah.
you can kind of tell that we're like, okay, Dorothy, we love you, but we got other stuff. This is more important. Um, so she then connects with the farm hands, who are also, you know, keeping busy on the farm, and, tells them the same story. And they're basically kind of like, you gotta stop, you gotta get out of trouble. You're always trying to find trouble. There's a very personally scary part where she falls into a pig pen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Always scared me as a child because the pigs were about to eat, and then she's kind of playing around in the pig
Mm.
pen and falls in. And she's rescued by one of the farm hands. And at the end, he's, obviously very upset, was very scared. And you're like, oh, wow, I wonder which one of Dorothy's friends you're going to be. It's so and basically, they oh, and brings out, this is not important, but she brings out a delicious plate of donuts, which
Yeah,
I
cruller
Uh,
donuts.
the crullers looked so good. But basically they told Dorothy, you just gotta stay out of trouble. Maybe Miss Gulch wouldn't want to take Toto if you didn't bring Toto that way. You ever think about going another way home, and so that Toto doesn't bother her cat? That's not an answer she wants to hear. But what she does hear from them is that, you should get out of trouble, stay out of trouble. So in her mind, she's trying to find a place without any trouble. And that leads into the opening song of the film, the greatest I Want song in any musical, Somewhere Over the Rainbow.
Wow. Okay, wow. What a summary. It's so
Yeah.
concise and yet detail filled. I guess you're the new
yeah.
host. Let me just leave the Zoom call.
I'm telling
But
you, I
that
know this film very well.
I know that was such a good like
Yeah.
it was so concise. I think it was like so detailed yet concise is what really got me. Yeah, I mean I'm a big advocate. I live in Los Angeles. I'm in the gutter, the worst environment for people who don't want to leash their dogs yet bring their dogs everywhere. So I have some sympathy. I'm like, just get a leash for Toto, or
Yeah.
don't go by
Yeah.
her house. But also, we found out Miss Gulch is the landlord. She's
Yeah.
rich and she's trying to kill her pet. And now I'm a pet owner myself. I'm like, honestly, drop a house on this lady. She sucks.
Yeah. But I think what's really great about this whole sequence is that like we start with Dorothy and like the stakes for her are very high because like the dog, like
It's her
she's gonna
best
try to kill
friend.
the dog, her best friend, like the only living being that's like giving her the time of day right now. And so like it's so effective at like getting me to care so much about Dorothy and Toto that like even though I know like they have stuff going on, like obviously like, as an adult, I would kind of be like, Dorothy, come on, but it's so effective that I'm like, listen to her. Like the dog is in danger. And
Yeah.
like,
This is her world.
Hmm.
yes, like it's so effective at setting that up for sure.
It's it's very relatable and it is such a beautiful song. It can really make me tear up. Miss Gulch comes to take Toto.
Yeah.
She's got the sheriff in her pocket. I never liked her as a kid, but as an adult, they like give all these details and I'm like,
Oh,
oh my
mhm.
gosh, I hate this lady.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Annie M says like a really interesting detail like later in the scene where she's like, you may own like 60% of this town. And then I sort of just like got the scope of who this lady is. Like I think I never
Hmm.
noticed that before. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
she's rich, rich. Okay. I
She's
hate her even
not like
more.
the eccentric, grumpy old lady on the corner of town. Like she's moms for liberty.
Yeah.
Yes. And like she like comes from money. She is
Yeah.
like generational wealth.
And
And like
in early Kansas, so that was not
exact
bloodless money.
No.
exactly. And like she's coming to this farm where these people are contributing to the economy that she gets to leech off of. So it's like,
Hmm.
yeah, she's the worst.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I think of this line that Aunt Em says when she's like, "Well, we have to take her," and like you kind of get the adults being like, "Well, it's from the sheriff. We have to like let her
Yeah.
comply. But Dorothy's just like, no, it's like it's such a like I'm because you're with Dorothy because I'm like that would be I would defy the law to protect my pet.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, especially because I think Miss Gulch is lying that she was bit.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
She's just annoyed that Toto keeps running into her yard.
which like
Yeah.
fair, but maybe be like, here's a leash, use
Yeah.
it. Or
Yeah.
maybe don't take the dog with you to school.
Right.
It's
Yeah, because
basically
this is an era where like children are to be not seen, to be not heard. And so like Dorothy is taking up space in this world. And like again, like we did not see Toto running around chasing a cat. We did not see him bite
mhm,
her. We just see them running away from the scene. So
Hmm.
yeah,
it's like we're inclined to believe Dorothy because she's not evil.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
like, yeah, like you're right. Like, who's to say she actually got bit? Like,
Yeah. And
And
just
no,
really holding space for the lyrics of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Uh, just like being in queer media, but like yeah, just like her desire for like just a place that's like happy and nice.
yeah. I
Like,
mean, it's also like one of those things that when you're rewatching it as an adult, you're like, oh yeah, or when you're a kid, you're like, oh yeah, she lives with her aunt and uncle. And then you're as an adult, you're like, oh, that's because she probably doesn't have parents. And
yeah.
these are her very clearly like great aunt and uncle. Like these are
yeah,
Mhm.
they're much older. Like she's very much like ended up here not by her own choice and is kind of unfortunately become a little bit of a burden, on this farm. She's just kind of in her own world. And I mean, this is in 39 and obviously is from a story from 1900, but it's very clear that this is like Dust Bowl
hmm
Mhm.
influence and everything is very hard and like with the chickens like all of their chickens are about to die, the chicks, and like it's just such a bleak existence for like a
yeah,
poor little girl. So no wonder she wants to leave, and go
yeah.
somewhere else and like has
Yeah.
this most beautiful fantasy because like it is a very sad existence.
And they're trying to destroy like her one little piece of joy.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
like her only buddy, her only ally.
Uh, Aunt M says this iconic line though that I think of all the time, especially at work.
Mhm.
I've been waiting for 23 years to tell you what I think of you, and now, while being a Christian woman, I
I
can't say it.
can't.
I want to think that all the time. I'm a good Christian woman, and I can't say what I think of you. Because
Uh,
people really be testing me.
Maybe
Uh,
testing that Catholicism.
yeah, those two baptisms. Take a
Because
shot.
the first one didn't stick,
First one didn't stick. Um,
according to the Pope.
according to Papa Francis. But yeah, Toto escapes Mrs. Gulch's basket, or she's running away. And Dorothy's like, "Okay, yes, you escaped, but like we gotta run away. There's
She's gonna come back for you.
yeah." Um, and she runs away and finds Professor Marvel. Not is Professor Marvel a superhero? I'm like, there's Doctor Strange, there's
Captain
Captain
Marvel?
Marvel,
I don't think
Professor.
Professor. No, I don't think there's a
No.
Professor
Mm-mm.
Marvel. There should be.
Yeah, wait a few more movies and
They
maybe.
got enough of them at this point. Like,
Yeah,
throw
right.
another guy in there.
And she gets like a TikTok tarot reading,
Yeah.
much more customized actually, because like he brings her in and he's like, "Oh, like let me see." And he's like, "Close your eyes." And he just like looks through her stuff, pieces it
Yeah.
together. Uh I there's a he talked about the ball being used by the priests of Isis and Osiris. So, Gods of Egypt reference, Hannah.
Shout out. Yeah.
Shout out to our favorite movie. And I love that instead of stranger danger, she kind of runs across like the nicest stranger. She's like, "Let me run away with you." And he's like, "Okay, little girl, like I'm not trying to kidnap a child."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. It looks like you're running away. We live on a farm. Okay. And then, "Oh no, they must be worried sick," because they are. It's like, "Oh, she's having a heart attack."
Yeah.
It's like I love that he's a scammer, but he is like nice. He's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
let me just send this girl back home."
You're like, you gotta go. You gotta
Yeah.
go
Go
Toto
back.
ate one of the sausages he was grilling. He's like, "You've been fed, now get out."
Yeah, exactly.
Uh, and but as she's running home, a tornado hits. Starting my childhood obsession with tornadoes. Whenever we had a tornado warning, I'd be like, "Wow, we're going to Oz." I'd be like, "I feel the
Oh,
house
interesting.
moving." They'd be like, "Cullen, you're just being dramatic."
I'm ready.
Yeah, I was ready. I
Yeah.
was ready to go somewhere over the rainbow. And I had this Hot Wheels thing. There was an ad for it. It was like a twister, and it was supposed to like
Mm.
the cars would like swirl up in a circle.
Uh-huh.
It didn't work. It did not look like it did on the
Oh.
commercial, and it did not work. But I wanted that twister so badly, and I got it, and it really just shot them in the air.
It's so funny that you were like when you were a kid, you were like, "Ah, yes, like the Twister's gonna take me away to Oz." And here I was in the Midwest, scared of tornadoes because fascinated, but also scared because I'm like, those things are big and dangerous and scary. And I still have nightmares about tornadoes. Um, but the tornado in this movie, like it it looks really scary. Like from like you can see it in the background, the twister. I'm like, that's impressive. Like I'm scared right now, even though I know what's about to happen.
I feel like that's like one of the parts of this movie that's so it's just like so it's so lasting is like it's a practical effect with I think they used hose. I think it's like pantyhose that
Oh
they
Oh,
yeah.
use and like depth perception, right? Or something. I
huh.
can't remember exactly how they do it, but it is like and so many of the effects of this movie are practical that like even though this movie is, over 80 years old, it's like it looks believable,
Yeah.
in the tiny little house. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just even though these are not by modern day standards like good effects, like it's a good practical effect is timeless. And this movie
Yeah.
proves it because not it never takes you out. Like it's still scary. It's still scary to watch.
And the blocking of the scene is also very scary because you see Annie M screaming after Dorothy, and the farmhands and the uncle are coming in. They're like, "No, we have to get in the shelter," and they
Because it's
lock
like
the
in their
shelter.
yard.
Yeah, well, yeah, they have to go into the shelter. They don't have a basement, right? It's just like a hole with a big barn door latched to it. And they
Mm-hmm.
have to lock it behind them so it doesn't bust open. So like you see her get there just seconds after they go in, and like she's stuck out there and she's yanking on it. It won't come up. She's screaming for them. And in there, Anna M is probably screaming for her, but we can't hear her. So it's like the blocking of it is also super effective. Like it had my heart pumping.
Yeah. Especially just imagining being a kid going through that.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to shout at the screen, like, grab your mattress, get under your mattress, go to a
Yeah.
closet. But like obviously, like she's a child and I don't think they really knew about that stuff yet. They're just like, we have to go in the hole in the ground that we dug.
And she gets concussed. She gets
Yeah, she
hit by
does.
a window. And we'll get to my feelings on the dream sequence element of it. Um, uh, but let's, as this house flies away, let's touch base with the book. This, the pre-tornado part of the book, tiny. This is
Yeah.
all added. They live in a one-room house though, in the farm. It's like
Mm.
specifically one room. There's like two beds in the two different corners, one for Dorothy, one for Aunt Em and Henry. Uh, it's a gray world. Em and Henry are weather worn. They never smile. But Dorothy is playful and fun, and what keeps her smiling is Toto. So it's like this very just simple kind of setup, and then the tornado sweeps her away. Um, but it's like we get everything. Like the dog keeps her happy. She loves the dog, but the gray, you see how they expand it. It's like okay, it's a gray world. It's very sad. The dog is her everything,
Mhm.
and this really builds on that. But it is a lot longer of the movie than you think it is.
Yeah. I mean, Miss Gulch is obviously not in the book, and there's no sort of foreshadowing of people she knows being people she sees in Oz.
Yeah,
Um, Toto doesn't bite anybody. It's just kind of, here we go, tornado.
yeah. Yeah. But back to the movie. We land in Munchkin Land. We're not in Kansas anymore. The classic line. Everything goes from being gray to Technicolor, lush, beautiful
Mhm.
Technicolor. And she comes down in a bubble, bro. And her sister is a princess. Uh, we meet Glinda, who instantly is dragging Dorothy. She's like, "Are you
Yeah.
a good witch or a bad witch?" And Dorothy's like, neither. And she's like, witches are old and ugly. And Glinda's like, and she hears like tee-heeing from the leaves. And she's like, oh, because I'm a witch. Only, and she's like, oh, I've never, like, you're so beautiful. She's like, yeah, I'm a good witch. Only bad witches are old and ugly. And it's like, so was I potentially ugly there, Glinda? I see the groundwork for Wicked being laid in this scene.
Mm-hmm.
Glinda,
Hmm.
something is up with this Glinda. She has an agenda.
Yeah, she's got something going on.
Yeah, she's shady. Uh, Beautiful quinceanera dress though.
Yes, gorgeous.
Gorgeous. She's been wearing it
Doesn't look a
ever
day over
since.
15.
Yeah. Uh, but I did not clock that as a kid, so I don't know. But for some reason, like maybe it's just all the discourse we've had about like her role in the story.
Hmm.
But yeah, um, that she's like, yeah, it's okay. There's an evil witch. You killed her. She sucked. It's fine. You freed the Munchkins. And they want to know if you're a good witch or a bad witch. Like, should they be scared? And Dorothy's like, I killed somebody. I did a manslaughter.
Huh? Oh.
I'm trying to get out of trouble, not have a manslaughter charge. I'm
Yeah.
a political figure.
Yeah, she does. She becomes a political figure
Very
and
quickly and not
she
by
gets a
choice.
holiday, it's like a
She's gonna have a
something.
bust in the Hall of Fame, which I know there's an Oz theme park, and I think it's like not licensed, but I would
No, I
love
think it's
it.
in Tennessee.
Yeah,
Mm.
I have an anecdote about meeting the actors who played the Munchkins. I don't know if you want to do it now or
let's
then.
go. Let's do it.
Let's do
Okay,
it.
The
great. Because
Munchkins come out of the bushes. They're little people. They're magical. They live in this land. You met them, Jenna. What's up?
so so I grew up in upstate New York, and like I said, my mom was a Wizard of Oz fan. So in L. Frank Baum is from Chittenango, New York. And every year they have an Oz festival. It was called Ozfest until there was like a metal Ozzy Fest. So then they became Oz Stravaganza. But when I went, it was the Ozfest. And it was 1999. And at the time, there was probably like 10 actors still living who played Munchkins in The Wizard of Oz. And I met them
Oh my
Mhm.
personally. And it was a very, very fun experience as a 7-year old. I will have pictures. And they had their costumes basically, some of them had them like remade that would fit them as like 70-year-old, people. And it was amazing. So the one of the most famous one who was there, who I met, was the coroner. And yeah, and he had like a replica costume. And basically, they would just go, okay, here's a picture. I have like physical pictures
God.
afterwards. But anyway, there's the coroner, and
Oh
there's
my
a woman with like
gosh.
a teapot hat. And then it's just like the most bizarre. And we met them like in just like a community center. Like there was a parade, but like I got to meet them like in this community center. But there's me as a
Oh,
little girl and my
Oh
brother,
my gosh.
and
that's
there's
so
like one of
cute.
the munchkins.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but they were like, this is great. We made this movie when we were like 17 years old, and
Yeah.
now we're like grown people with grandchildren, and we get to come back and be on a float in a parade, and everyone applauds us. Like
Yeah.
they loved it. And so yeah, I was going through in advance of our chat and just kind of looking through my pictures of that. But it is like the deepest. Oz lore of my life is like meeting them as a 7-year-old, like every other normal kid. That's what you do on your summer vacation, right? Is you meet the Munchkin actors from The Wizard of Oz. But one of them was the Lollipop, someone in the Lollipop
Oh my
Guild,
gosh.
Uh-huh.
Iconic.
Iconic.
trumpeter, one of the soldiers. Yeah, and the coroner, but the coroner is like objectively the most
Yeah.
Yeah.
iconic one. But yeah, so that's my small a little dose of personal Oz lore.
I
That
love
is
that.
so cool.
That
Ugh.
is so cool. I mean, this Munchkin sequence is very it's pretty long. This movie is very fast paced, but as
Hmm.
a kid, it did feel like this was one of the longest, most epic movies.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and so yeah, the Munchkin. I was like, I could have sworn this was like 20 minutes as a kid, but this is like 10 total of Munchkin Land. But it's a big song with like lots of different songs in one.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Um. And there's this part that's getting memed now where Dorothy's explaining, like, it really was a miracle because they're like, oh, when she came down from Kansas, the star, this happened. And she's like, oh, it's a miracle. And she's like, starts singing. And Glenn is standing there, like,
Like,
with a very forced smile, like, and now there's all these memes of like with the context of Wicked, like dealing with like your life imploding, and Dorothy starts singing about the house, and you're just like, yeah.
you're like, yeah, girl, okay, okay, sure. My fiance just left me for my best friend, but fine.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's I love all the Oz memes we're getting.
but you gotta separate your personal life and work, you know? You
Yeah.
just gotta do that.
She's clocked in. She's
Yeah.
clocked in.
She's clocked in for all this. Ding Dong the Witch is Dead is probably the most iconic part of this song, but we get like the mayor and the coroner, and she's gonna get a bus. And I was saying if there's an Oz theme park, I think a really fun detail would be if there was like a Hall of Fame with a Dorothy bust.
True.
Yeah.
Uh yeah, so they love her. But then the Wicked Witch shows up. Explosion.
Hmm.
Uh and they all the munchkins as a kid for a second I was like, wait, did they die? But no, they're just scared.
They
Like,
all got blown up.
yeah. There's a big fiery smoke. The Wicked Witch of the West appears. Who killed my sister? And Glinda's like, oh yeah, she has a sister. She's even more powerful. And Dorothy's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, she's just
Yeah.
like, I'm getting so much lore right now.
Yeah, like talk about trauma dumping, info dumping, and
So not only did she kill this witch, but now she's making an enemy. She was just like
Hmm.
crowned a hero. Now she has an enemy.
yeah,
She's 16. She's a child.
she's Judy's 16. It's unclear how old Dorothy is supposed to be.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but she's still a girl. That you're like, that's a kid.
Uh-huh.
And so the Wicked Witch is like, "You killed my sister," and then Glinda's like, "Oh, what about her magical shoes? Those were really powerful." And the witch is like, "Oh yes," and then Glinda's like, "Oops, I gave them to Dorothy." And Dorothy's like, "What? I didn't ask for this." And she's like, I'll kill you to get those shoes." And Glinda's like, "You have no power here." I think that all the time whenever I want someone to go away. I'm like, "You have no power here. Now leave before someone drops the house on you." Like, all way to drag somebody after their family member died.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but
Show up to the next funeral you go to and say that.
and the witch is like, "Fine, but I'll get you, my pretty, you and your little dog
Dog
too."
too.
And Glenda's like, "Oh, it seems you've made a really powerful enemy." And Dorothy's like,
Sorry.
So matter of fact about it. It's so funny.
"It's like Glenda just like set her up."
Yeah.
She didn't ask for those shoes.
Yeah,
Yeah. It sounds like she's trying to distract the Wicked Witch. So,
yeah. She's like, Dorothy's like, oh, I guess there's like, she's like, oh, they fit and you can't take them off and they're really powerful, but they'll protect you, sort of. But you better get out of here soon. Um, and like Dorothy's like, yeah, I want to go back to Kansas. And she's like, yeah, follow the yellow brick road, and then
yeah,
she
because
just float.
you can't go back the way you came because
Yeah,
the house is just broken.
Can't put yourself in the Hot Wheels tornado and just
Yeah.
Yeah.
launch yourself up.
Hit the trigger. Woo.
Ooh,
It
yeah.
doesn't work. It doesn't work like it does in the commercial.
No.
Mm.
And she bubbles off.
Yes.
And they're just like, yeah, just like, bye. And
Right.
I do want to know what like some of these Munchkin guilds do. Like, what is the Lollipop Guild? Are they like a club? Are they a union?
I would
Same with the
assume,
Lullaby League.
yeah, I would assume kind of like different, like the Elks and the
Yeah.
VFW,
Oh yeah.
very ambiguous war-related clubs.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Because
The
that,
Lullaby League, probably sleeper agents.
yeah.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah. I'm like, are the Lollipop Guild, are they protecting the rights of the lollipop harvesters?
Mm-hmm.
Probably. That sounds like
Yep.
something that would exist in
Yeah.
Oz.
Yeah.
Lollipop field with workers, and they were mistreated, so they did have
Yeah.
to unionize.
By the Wicked
Yep.
Witch of the East. They were in
Yeah.
the middle of like her union busting when
Hmm.
Dorothy
Uh-huh.
busted her.
Literally.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Wow.
She was probably like basically the Jeff Bezos of Oz.
yeah, and I mean,
Yeah.
even if you look to like I know you guys are gonna talk about Wicked later, but that's kind of
Her
what
vibe.
her vibe is. It's very clear in Wicked that that is what the Wicked Witch of the East is, sort of like a dictator over Munchkin Land.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's why they're very happy she's gone.
The Wicked Witch of the East, bro. Uh uh so Dorothy goes down the Yellow Brick Road. Book. Our book check-in.
Mhm.
Uh in Munchkinland. So she lands in Munchkinland, and it's just kind of an assembly of munchkins. They all wear blue, and the Good Witch of the North, who's a kindly old lady in white who does a lot of weird magic balancing stuff on her nose.
Mhm.
Um, and she gives Dorothy a kiss that protects her. That
Mm.
like no one will harm you. It shows that like you have my blessing. They think she's a witch. They give her the silver shoes. So they're silver in the book, and so that's why anything that is not owned by MGM does not have ruby slippers. They're very protective of that iconography. Um, because it was made ruby just because that's fancier with Technicolor.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so she's given the silver shoes. The Good Witch of the North is like they're powerful, but I don't know what they do. That's why you should go to the wizard. Uh, and because Dorothy's immediately like, I just want to get home. They also, on her way down the Yellow Brick Road, she stops by the house of Bach.
Yes, yes. Who is
Interesting.
a powerful and very old munchkin who takes her in, and there's like other family there, and lets her rest there for the night and feeds her and everything like that. But it is interesting that they
Hmm.
they do call it that it's Bach, because you're like, oh, if I know Wicked, then this does
Mm-hmm.
not canonically track.
Yeah, Bach is,
Uh-huh.
but it's like that name that I think people think that character is like musical original, but
Interesting.
he's Gregory Maguire got him from somewhere. And they also comment that her dress in the book is blue and white, like in the movie, because blue is the Munchkin color and white is the witch color. So they're
Oh,
like, okay, you're a witch and you're pro Munchkin. Because
we like that.
yeah, each area of Oz is color coded, like the Irish flag, you know? It's like the different groups have their color, and like the blue is the Munchkinlanders. So they
Got
have
it.
blue houses, they wear blue. Um, and those are our main differences. Uh, but in the back to the movie, she's going down the Yellow Brick Road, and she meets the Scarecrow, pointing different ways, right there in Hannah's backyard. Um, he wants to be a great thinker. He doesn't have a brain. He doesn't know anything. Uh, and so he wants to. The thoughts he was thinking he could be another Lincoln. You know. Uh, so he wants to get a brain. And she's like, "Well, I'm gonna see the wizard. If he can take me home, maybe he can give you a brain. What else are you doing? Uh,
Just
road
hanging
trip,
around.
hanging
Not scaring
around.
crows that well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is the best. I love this D&D party that's slowly forming
Yeah.
Yes.
of definitely level one characters.
Yeah.
Uh, and we get this sequence where Dorothy is trying to get apples from this tree. The witch is spying on them. Uh, And the trees are angry that she's stealing their apples. They're actually related to the trees from Snow White. They're cousins. Uh, Angry mean trees.
Hmm,
Mm.
But they're not. I don't know if this would be nymph representation as much as just talking tree representation.
got it.
Yeah. But they start the scarecrow tricks the trees into giving them apples by insulting them and being like, "Oh, they're full of worms," and they start throwing the apples at them. So
It's like
he
that's how you get apples.
concocted a little scheme in that little
Mm-hmm.
straw head of his.
Yeah, maybe
Yep.
he's so
Yeah. I
silly. He
mean,
also has, I mean, have you guys ever seen the extended cut of the If I Only Had a Brain Dance?
Mm-mm.
There's like a much longer version, and it's so incredible to watch because of the like insane kind of athleticism he has in this dance is such it's so good. I mean, obviously he's, very like, I'm made
yeah.
of straw, but kind of like what he's able to do, his body looks like rubber, like the way he's
Mm.
Yeah.
like bend and control. It's incredible. Definitely worth
Wow.
like on YouTube.
Yeah, and his makeup is really interesting. Like seeing up close, like you can see like what would be the cloth of his face. It just like the way it's created is really cool. Like he literally looks like he could be made of straw with that cloth on his face. Like it's
Mhm.
really incredible.
Yeah, it's we did a production of not the musical. We did like a royalty free, the homeschoolers did. I was in a play about America and the teenagers got to do Wizard of Oz.
Wow.
My brother was the Cowardly Lion.
Oh.
But they like ended up switching the person who was cast as the wizard and the scarecrow because they were like, we need someone floppier. Andrew fit the bill. He was floppier. And those all three guys were famously bad at like remembering their lines, but they had really good chemistry and like we're just like they would just riff off of each other. They like wouldn't get thrown off by the other one not remembering their lines. So it's like, you know what? It works. Like Dorothy's keeping them all on track and they're just kind of like goofing through the thing.
Mm.
Love it.
Uh, so time to meet our next companion. They're off to see the wizard. And we hear Oil Can from the Tin Man, who was my favorite as a kid. I used to play this part all the time where he went, Oil Can. Uh, and he's all rusted. And so they have to. I love how they do the little oil, like, it makes me think of like a
Yeah.
point and click PC game.
Oh.
Yeah, and he becomes unoiled, and he's like, "Oh, thank you. I was caught in the rain. Um, uh, I wish I had his things. He wants to have a heart. You know,
The book version of the Tin Man story is so brutal. It is like unnecessarily violent for a children's book.
yeah,
The long and the short of it is that basically he fell in love with I think a Munchkin Land girl,
yeah,
and she lived with a woman who basically kept her as like her servant and didn't want her to be married. So I think she paid the witch. I can't remember how she did it, but
yeah,
basically the witch enchanted the Tin Man when he was just a regular man, his axe, and it basically caused him to chop his own limbs off. So it would be one at a time, I know. And then he'd be like, I chopped off my leg. So I went to the tinsmith and he built me a new leg. Then I chopped off my other leg. And basically it does his entire body.
mm-hmm,
And then by the time he is a Tin Man, the girl does not want to marry him anymore.
Oh
yeah,
my
That's how
God.
it happens in the children's book. Isn't that? And that's why he
Whoa.
doesn't have a heart because he like lost his love in
his,
this girl because she didn't want to be with him because he's
Right.
a man, I think is yeah.
Wow.
So it's a lot darker. I think just
yeah,
in the movie you just kind of assume because everyone's sort of like an interesting creature that you're like, of course a man is made of tin.
Sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
his
Checks
own
out.
leg off.
Yeah. Wow.
yeah.
That's dark.
It's some
Hmm.
dark stuff. Which yeah, I was gonna do a book check-in, but that's basically it. There is a lot though in the book about he cries a lot, and that you can't stop
Hmm.
cry because he'll get rusted. And
Uh-huh.
he works extra hard not to hurt any living animal, any bugs, because he's like, well, I don't have a heart, so I have to be careful, because that could be really mean, because they don't have a heart stopping me. So he's very actively kind.
Hmm.
Um, which I mean, we could get into people who just think that oh, I'm just a good person, and then so they never actually try to be a good person, and they're actually terrible to everyone around them. And then people who are like, oh, I need to try to be a good person tend to act more in a kinder way. So it's an interesting. I just that's part of why I love the Oz books is because like they have so much relevance, even though they're weird. Uh, yeah. So he sings he wants a heart. He wants to fall in love. There's a cameo in his song. Who do you think the cameo is? Hannah singing the "Wherefore Art Thou Romeo." I will give you a hint. She is her story's soon to be remade,
I know the
and it's not How to Train Your Dragon live action. Sorry,
who is
that's
it?
similar. It's Adriana Castelletti, the voice of Snow White,
Hmm.
Oh, interesting.
who did not do much after Snow White because of a pretty terrible contract that Disney trapped her in, but she did do this.
Mm.
Yeah, we'll probably
Oh,
when we
that's
when we
interesting.
tackle Snow White, we'll get into more of her story. But yeah, um, so he joins the party. They run into an encounter with the witch, um, and she's tries to light them on fire.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And they're like, "You're just a bully." They're scared of her, but they're like, "Stop bothering us." But she can only do so much with all her protectors around. So the witch is scheming. She's like, "I got to think of a new way to get that girl. She has too many helpers."
Mhm.
Um, that's why she leaves, right? Now I'm like, wait, it's not because of rain. That's in the Wicked book. Like I'm
I
consuming
think,
so much Oz content. I'm like, wait, which is in?
well, she throws a fireball at the scarecrow,
Yeah.
Mm.
and then they all rush to help him. And then I think she just kind of like,
Leaves of her own accord.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
she's kind of like, I've done my scaring for now, right?
Yeah. It's more
Yeah.
tourism.
I don't think they threaten her. I think that they just run to put out the fire because his
Fire.
lights on fire.
Yeah. I mean, they
Yeah.
try and be like, hey, leave us alone. But she just is
Right.
like, light me up. I'm on fire. Fallout Boy.
Yeah.
That's the jukebox musical version.
Oh
Oh yeah.
no. Don't put that out into the universe.
Yeah. They're going down. They're in the woods. They're scared of lions and tigers and bears.
Oh
Oh
my.
my.
Mhm.
And we meet a lion and a man or a man in a lion suit, but a lion. And Dorothy immediately bitch slaps him
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
because he goes after Toto, and she's like, "I did not go through all this to save Toto just for this lion to harass her." She just
Uh-huh.
slaps him in the face. She's like, "Shut the fuck up."
Yeah.
There is a TikTok that's going viral of that very specific moment because the lion's crying because she hit him. And if you look closely, Toto's put his little paw on the lion's arm. Like, I'm so sorry. And
Oh.
with the video of the girl of the TikTok, the girl's just like sobbing, seeing this happen. And Toto's just like, he's
It's
holding,
okay.
Oh.
you know?
He's
It's
holding space.
as we
Yeah.
all are.
What does that even
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Uh,
I love this is one of my favorite Dorothy scenes because she's like, "You're a big lion, you shouldn't be bullying tiny dogs
Mhm.
and bullying people." And he's like, "I'm just a coward. I'm scared of my own self. I haven't slept in days." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh.
yeah, he's
Is
gonna be hallucinating
is he a
soon.
college student?" Because that was me not sleeping for like over 24 hours. I love being an adult and realizing that when I sleep regularly, my eyes don't hurt.
Right?
I'm like, wow, my one day I was just sitting at my desk, my eyes haven't hurt in a long time. So yeah, they're like, well, maybe the wizard will give you courage, but he thinks if I only had the nerve because courage doesn't fit as many syllables. But they're like, all right, let's go. He has the shortest song. They're like, we just did two of these. You don't want to
It's the
hear a
same
third
melody.
one.
You know what it is.
Mhm.
Let's move on.
I love them for that. I love them for
Yeah.
being like,
Like
okay,
we
we've
got
done
it.
this twice.
Yeah.
Third time's the speed up group one.
Exactly.
And so they go on to their to see the Emerald City, and the witch is like, everyone keeps helping that girl. She has all these friends. I'm sick of her. She is giving like Marjorie Taylor Greene, like she's just trying to like destroy. Like she's like all the liberals have all these friends, and one I wish that I want them to die. I just feel like that's like when I started to just see like Congress people as like old movie villains, I was like, this all makes sense. They're just like career level haters who are like, oh, I hate that they're happy to have friends. I wish they were just dead. And then I would have their shit. Uh so she's like, okay, yes, poppies. That will make them sleep.
There they are.
Uh,
There they are, the poppies.
They
the
are.
poppies. And so she sends the poppies. And Dorothy and the Cowardly Lion zonk out. They're tired. We see the Emerald City. Let's just take a little rest. That's me. This is why treadmills sometimes mess with me. If I'm like running a certain distance and then I only have like a mile left. I'm like, what if I just like slowed down the pace and like do a little like break? I'm like, no, you're so close. But you're like, but yeah, then it'll be even shorter when I'm done with my little break. But so she puts down the poppies. They're zonked out, and they start calling for help. And he's like, Tin Man, don't cry, then you'll rust. Like Dorothy has the oil can. Like,
And
uh,
the Tin Man and the Scarecrow don't fall victim to the poppies because what they are not made of
Made of
meat.
meat.
They're not
they
That
made of
makes sense.
meat.
their stats, their racial D&D stats, they cannot be charmed or put to sleep by magic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm,
Um, and Glinda sends some snow.
hmm
She does some wand waving, sends some snow, which, as everyone knows, neutralizes the poppies. And they wake up. I don't think it's asbestos. I know people say that a lot, but
I don't know.
I
That's like one of those ones that I'm like, is that true?
I mean, if you think about it, asbestos was like used in everything, like for building and stuff. So it's like it could be
hmm
like it makes sense. It was the 30s. They
Yeah.
didn't know it was bad yet. So
Yeah. I
it
mean, yeah,
might be.
again, people hadn't even decided Nazis were entirely bad yet. And I thought we
There you
had all
go.
decided. And then suddenly people are rewriting the plot. It's like, wait, wait, wait. Uh,
Yeah.
so they're out of the woods. They're out of the dark. They're out of the night. Sung by the chorus. I think in the Andrew Lloyd Webber stage musical, it's like Glinda singing this. Because
Just
Mr. Bad Cinderella did was behind like a Broadway stage version.
Yes.
I think
oh.
starring Eartha Kitt
Oh,
in Wizard of the West.
interesting.
I did not do much research into it because they were like, I'm like, there's so many more relevant things I need to get into.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but he's like, I need to be behind two rainbow related musicals. Technicolor
Right.
Dreamcoat isn't enough.
hmm
Yeah.
But like to check in with the book, and there's some encounters that in the book on in this early part of their journey. They meet Kalidas, who are part tiger, part bear. Oh
hmm
my.
Mm.
And they attack them and they have to escape and they all use their skills. The Tin Woodsman's axe, the Scarecrow makes the plan. The Lion is very brave. He's always like, oh, I'm so scared. And it's really interesting because he's scared, but he does brave things. He does have courage. He's having courage and be kinding it. But he thinks
Well, not
because
always.
not always,
He sometimes is chasing after little dogs.
yeah, but he's afraid. He thinks that, oh, because he experiences fear, he's a coward, even though
hmm
he
Right.
overcomes it. There's also a part where they get swept away by a river. They get swept off course. Scarecrow is almost
Oh,
stuck there forever.
but they leave him at one point.
Yeah.
like stuck in the middle, like I don't know, on like a pole or something. Like he's
Yeah.
like on, and they're like, "Sorry, bye."
Yeah.
Uh, but
Oh.
they're devastated, and but a crane comes by and helps them.
Mhm.
I like to think that's Fei Fei's mom from Over the Moon. Uh,
Nice.
and she helps them, and she's like, "Okay, gotta go get to my babies." And Dorothy's
Yep.
like, "People and animals are so good and helpful." I'm like, "I love you, Dorothy." But so she helps them get the scarecrow, and then when the poppies happen, and the poppies aren't sent by the witch; they're just off course because they're no one has mentioned the Witch of the West. They're off the road, so they land in these poppies, and then the Tin Woodsman sees a cat chasing a mouse. This is hard for me as a cat person, but I get the impetus. He's like, the cat's trying to kill that mouse. I'm gonna save the mouse. So he kills the cat with his axe. Yeah. And the mouse turns out to be Queen of the Field Mice.
Yes.
Mm.
Uh, and she's like, "Oh, like we're forever in your debt," and
It's a real
they help.
stroke of luck.
Yeah. And so all the field mice save the lion and Dorothy from the poppies. They like help
Like,
drag them out.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Thousands of mice. And so they made some new friends, and then she's like, okay, the road's this way. They get back to the road. But the snow saving them from the poppies sent by the Good Witch of the North is actually in the 1902 Broadway version.
Hmm.
Oh.
But there's
Interesting.
also a whole plot about the lost king of Oz and his waitress girlfriend and ex-girlfriend trying to regain their throne, turning them into fugitives after they get help from the wizard. So very different storyline.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but we get to the Emerald City in this movie, and they're trying to get in, and oh, we want to see the wizard. It's like, well, okay, that's like going up to the White House. I want to see the president. And she's like, "Well, I have the ruby slippers sent by the Good Witch of the North." And they're like, "Oh, that's a horse of a different color." Speaking of which, here's our horse that changes colors. Made from gelatin,
Hmm.
jello dye.
Okay.
And fun fact, this horse is the ancestor of all the ponies in My Little Pony.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah, just depending on when the horse conceived the pony affects the color. I'm sure I just made that
Oh, I was
I'm
like,
like,
what?
I'm looking, I'm like, I don't think so, Fred.
What? That's funny.
Yeah,
I love my favorite part, like trivia about the horse, because I am also unfortunately a horse girl.
it happens.
It happens,
Happens
the
to the
best
best
of
of
us.
us.
Lifelong Wizard of Oz, lifelong horse girl.
Horse girl.
You can't see, but I do have ribbons behind me. It's fine.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but so the takes of the shots of the horse are like very quick because it would keep like trying to lick the jello off.
Yeah,
So it's
Mm.
like
that
anytime you
makes sense.
see him, it's like one color, next color, because he's like, I really gotta eat this jello. Like I really,
Uh-huh.
you know,
Same.
that was always my favorite part as a kid because I was a horse girl. But it's like that is from, like obviously the beginning when you change into black and white to color, but like the horse of a different color is like such a magnificent, you
Yeah.
know, spectacle. And it's just practical. Again, it's just practical
Yeah.
effect. Yellow on a white horse or gelatin, not jello,
Yeah.
but I love
Yeah.
it.
Still, it is such a good effect. Did you ever play the game Horse Show? It was a card game
No,
where
I
there
did
was
play
like
the Mary Kate and Ashley one though.
Oh. Mhm.
But
it was like these you had like the different competitions. There's like dressage and stuff, and you had to get ribbon, and you had like the horses had different stats.
no, it
I had
was
a horse sibling, so
oh, I didn't have enough friends, so I never had anyone to play with.
I should have
But now
told the horse.
You'll have to find what it is and send it to her.
and
Yeah.
force my husband to play it. I'll be
There you
like, you
go.
play a round of this and then play a round of like Magic the Gathering. I don't know.
There you
Um,
go.
I
A
think
give
it
and take.
actually would kind of scratch that strategy itch. Like just thinking about it now, I'm like, that would be, yeah.
I, that sounds delightful, and I would absolutely play that.
I'll see if it's still in print. See if I find a link. I'll
Perfect.
send it to you.
Perfect.
So we're in the Emerald City. Everything's green. We get the Merry Land of Oz, which is I don't for one of the reasons one of my favorite songs After
It's so
Somewhere
good.
with a Rainbow, it's just like it's cheerful. I love their work schedule. They get up at 12, go to work at 1, take an hour for lunch, and then they're done.
Yeah.
This is the future AOC wants. This is the Lollipop Guild's agenda reaching its full fruition.
Yes.
And they get makeovers. Dorothy
Mm.
discovers colored contacts. Can even dye my eyes to match my gown.
Hmm.
Uh, so they're all spiffed up. Um,
I love that her and the lion have the same hairdo.
yeah.
The
Little bow.
curls. Yeah.
Little curls and a red bow.
Yeah.
It's a good
Uh,
look.
Yeah.
and it's interrupted by the witch saying, "Surrender, Dorothy."
Mhm.
Yeah, writing,
Skywriting.
skywriting. Uh, which will forever make me think of the SpongeBob Gary Come Home movie. Who's That's Lisa person? Yeah. But this part used to scare me a lot as a kid. She's riding on her broom, writing words, terrorism. And so they're like, we got to see the wizard. And we have it like we got to. He's like, I didn't see people, and they're like, please. And then he's like crying. And he's like, ah, fine, just a second. But first, we get If I Were King of the Forest. I think they said Carly Line had a shorter song earlier. Here's his song.
Yep.
This is the one point of the movie where I'm like, okay, this plot has come to a halt.
I wonder if it was something like obviously because before this movie, Burt Lahr was like a big vaudeville star, and like I wonder if it's one of those things where if you were an audience member in 1939 and you saw Burt Lahr, you're like, I expect that man to have a song. I expect
Right.
like this is his time to shine. But like watching as a person now, you're like, why are we giving him another song?
Yeah,
Yeah.
You know? But I
I
think it
think
might
that's
have just
it.
been like he's a star, and this or it could have been in his contract too. You know what I mean? Like at
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
time, I feel like they, he probably was him. I mean, obviously, him and Billy Bergsiegfeld, who played Glinda, were big vaudeville stars, but it could have just been, like we got to use him,
yeah. They're like, we
Yeah.
cast Harry Styles, and don't worry, darling, we got to make him do a weird little dance.
right?
It's Harry Styles.
Right.
Yeah. I guess yeah, I think that is the right context to view it as like this is a performer and people would be annoyed if they'd be like, why did you cast Bert if you didn't have him do a little song?
Hmm.
And to be fair, it's not that long of a song. As a kid, I did think like, oh, this song's
Oh, forever,
hours.
forever.
uh Not Queen, not Prince, not Duke. Um And this is where my sibling would always be like, lions don't live in the forest. They live in the savannah. And I'd be like, yeah, I love the animal facts I used to get. Like those wolves in Beauty and the Beast, they have to be enchanted because wolves don't attack humans unprovoked.
They're just going on an actually rant during the
Yeah.
movie.
And I remember going like to the zoo with friends and like saying animal facts. We're like, how do you know this? Are you like really
Like
into
my
animals? I'm like,
sibling.
my sibling. Like I just assumed everyone else was getting this knowledge. But they're summoned in to see the wizard. And he's the mean floating head with
Yeah.
fire. They're shaking in their boots,
Hmm.
boots the house down, you know. They're shaking. Dorothy's like, he's like, I'm the great and terrible. She's like, I'm the small and meek. And they're like, well, this is what we want. He's like, you just want something for nothing? Like, you gotta work, you gotta,
RuPaul.
yeah, you gotta
Work
work. And they get off your ass and work.
and work.
And no one wants to work anymore. Oz Kardashian.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Uh, Wealth and money with no real skills. And they're like, bring me the broomstick of the Wicked Witch of the West. That's what the wizard says. And they're like, well, we'd have to like kill her to get that. He's like,
Like,
that sounds like a you
Well,
problem.
there's already one murderer in your midst.
Yeah. She's like, technically that was manslaughter.
I didn't know.
I don't know. I was just in a house. She does make that distinction in the book. She's like, I was in the house. And I'm like, well, it's your house.
It's like my name's not on the deed. It's Annie M's house.
I'm a child. Uh, And so they're like, okay, I guess we got to do that. The lion runs off, but Dorothy's pretty brave because at one point she's like, "Okay, wizard, just help us out." Or maybe that's the next time we see the wizard is when she starts going off on him.
Yeah.
She's just like, "I've had enough of your shit."
Mhm.
Uh, but we're in to connect with the book. In the book, the Emerald City isn't necessarily green as much as you are forced to wear green glasses to make it look green at all times.
Oh,
They're
They,
locked
interesting.
on your face.
yeah, they have a little, they go whoop, and then they lock behind your head.
Hate that.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
Uh, this is where like the dystopian angles that people will bring to Oz and things like Wicked are like heavily there. Uh, there's also a lot of emphasis on because they're like there are accommodations in Oz in the Emerald City, and that the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodsman get nice rooms, but they're kind of wasted on them because they don't eat or sleep. So the Scarecrow stares at like a spider in the corner all night.
Oh my
It's
God.
terrifying. Just like you're walking in, the Scarecrow just sitting there limp and activates when you walk in. Horrifying.
Don't like it.
Uh, there's also they each have separate appointments to see the wizard. Uh,
I forgot
Mm.
about this.
yeah, it's obviously for time that would be so boring to do in a book, but it is the wizard has always been a fascist, or like it's always been where it's like, oh, he has to separate them and have these interviews, and he looks
Mm.
different. Like he's a floating head for Dorothy, but the scarecrow sees a fancy lady, and the lion a fireball, and the woodsman a monster. And what gets
Mm.
me is that these could line up with what their fears are, but they
But not
don't.
But I
quite.
don't.
They don't because wouldn't the fancy lady be for the Tin Man who wants romance, and wouldn't
The
the
fireball would be for the
Fireball for the
scarecrow.
scarecrow.
and the monster the lion?
Yeah.
Maybe the wizard got confused as to who was who.
He's
I
not that.
He's not a good wizard.
That's right.
yeah.
That's
He's
a
like,
good
I
point.
know someone doesn't like fire. I know someone doesn't, has misses their love. Someone is just doesn't like monsters.
We're like,
Can't
I don't know
remember
which
which
wish.
ones, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll roll the dice and hope I'm right.
Yeah, he got a low roll on that one.
Yeah.
And so in the movie, we're at them leaving to go see the Wicked Witch in the Woods. And there's a cut song that she
Ugh.
references to the flying monkey. She's like, "I sent a bug, an insect, to get them all warmed up for you." So there's a cut song called the Jitterbug,
It's
and
so good.
and it was on the
Jitterbug.
soundtrack.
Wake me up before you go,
The
go.
cricket
Yeah,
commercial.
yeah.
Can't freaking.
But it's a really good song, and I'm like, wait, why did If I Were King of the Forest stay and this
And they
one
cut
get
the
cut?
jitterbug. There's
Mm.
still like some backs like footage of them doing the dance sequence because it was like a whole like 2 to 3 minute song of the jitterbug and it comes and attacks them but then they do the jitterbug dance but there's this sort of like almost found footage looking kind of from like the back of the trees that someone's involved with the production filmed of them like rehearsing it that
Mm.
exists like in the DVD like commentary versions of it but I love the Jitterbug song. It's so good. Judy Garland sounds so good on it, and it is a
Huh.
shame that it was cut. It is a shame that it was cut. What would have added 3 minutes to the movie? Like, come on.
Yeah, the bats and the bees and the knees and the trees make a terrible, horrible buzz, but the bats and bees and the knees and the trees don't do what the jitterbug does.
It's so good. You have
Yeah.
to listen to it, Hannah. It's so good.
Okay, I will.
Please.
Uh, yeah, I think you would find it as a bop.
Yeah.
Um, but instead we just get the flying monkeys, traumatizing many a child.
Terrifying.
Uh, I mean, I thought they were scary as a kid. I think I was more scared of the witch, but I know for a lot of people, like the monkeys specifically are like
Yep.
the fear.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's because like I know the witch is a lady, but like the
Mm.
monkeys are like uncanny. And I think as a kid, that really set me off. But also like the sounds, it's just, they're very freaky.
I think for me, people things were scarier than animal things. Not that I
Mm,
wasn't scared of animal type things as a kid, but I think like if so, I don't like when people are mean to me. So if it's a person who's like can be mean, like a witch, like the flying monkey, it's just being a monkey. But like the witch is like trying to fuck with me.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, they scoop up. She's like, well, I want Dorothy and the dog. So they rip out the scarecrow's innards and mess with everybody, and they scoop up Dorothy and Toto.
Yeah,
Pretty
it's
scary.
violent.
Uh, and the Wicked Witch is immediately like, well, I'm gonna try and drown your dog.
Yeah.
Hi. Well, in my house, I'm gonna drown your dog. Unless you give me the shoes. And Dorothy's like, have these shoes. Like,
Yeah, just
and
like
she
take them.
and she's like, oh, they don't come off. Oh, they won't come off unless as long as you're alive.
Hmm.
Uh, and Dorothy's like, fuck. And Toto escapes, and she's so happy. You feel how much. I know Judy said that dog had terrible breath, but she's great because she loves that dog. And you're like, get away, Toto.
Hmm.
And again,
Really
as
good
a
close-ups of her crying.
Yes.
A lot of this.
yeah, that would
Yeah.
be me if my pet was in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's so happy when he got away. She doesn't even know if he's gonna get help, but she's like, oh, thank God. Like,
Yeah.
and that would be me. Um, yeah. So she's like, okay, well, you have this long to live. Here's it flips over an hourglass.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and as a kid, I was always fascinated by hourglasses in like categories or whatever game because it'd be
Yep.
like it's like the giant red hourglass. And so she goes to brainstorm how she's gonna kill her. And there's a cut reprise of Somewhere Over the Rainbow in this moment.
Hmm.
But people were like, this is too sad. And it really is sad. Uh, and this is where she sees Aunt M. It was connected to the scene in the movie, but in the cut version, but now we're back in the movie as is. She sees Aunt M, the crystal ball, but it's just a trick from the Wicked Witch of the West. Because he's like, I'm scared, Aunt M. I'm trying to get home to you. And the Wicked Witch is like, I'm gonna mock you in your final moments. Ha ha, I'm scared. She's terrifying.
He's big bad.
Big
Real.
bad.
Hmm.
And this is probably why when I remember when someone gave my uncle gave my mom the Wicked book, and she never read it when she got it because she was like, doesn't matter how sad your childhood was, it doesn't give you a right to be mean to people. And I'm like, she's kind of right.
Yeah.
But I still love that book. But so Toto finds the boys trying to put the scarecrow back together and leads them to the castle. He's very useful in his what's that dog? Lassie era.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
Timmy's stuck in the well. And so they're gonna sneak in, and then we see the Winkies, which I do love in the Wicked book. Winky is a slur for like the
Oh,
people. They're like, oh, Winky's a slur because doesn't it sound like one?
It does. It's interesting because I feel like in the Wicked movie, not to bring the Wicked movie up, but they
It's
refer to
not.
him as yeah, that he like that's like Fiero is a Winky. Like
Yeah,
that's
right.
where he's
Yeah.
from.
yeah.
Huh.
I think they cut that because there's a lot that they shed from the book, and for
Sure.
good reason to keep it more
Yeah.
straightforward. But I
Yeah.
do love that because as soon as you're like, okay, Winky, I'm allowed to say that, right? And
Like, oh
he
wait, it's
Can I
literally an
say the slur that's in a made up world? Or will that
uh
offend someone?
it's like if you've ever listened to Misfits in Magic at Dimension 20, how like uh Muggle is like a slur and they're like Wizard Society. They're like, you can't say that. So they're gonna sneak in and they do the classic switch outfits with the guards.
love
Because
it.
earlier the Scarecrow had a gun,
He does
but
have a gun. I forgot about that.
the monkeys confiscated it.
Who gave that man a gun?
What?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I mean, hey, I was calling the Witch a Republican. Maybe she's a Democrat sending the monkeys to steal your guns. Uh,
Uh,
so they sneak in to the castle to get her. She's like, "Great!" They run off. The witch is like, "Leaving so soon? You only just arrived." And you get this very Scooby-Doo chase through her spooky castle.
Hmm.
Um, and then they catch up, and she's like, "You're gonna watch them all die one by one, Dorothy."
yikes.
Psychotic.
Yeah.
Uh, and she tries to light the scarecrow on fire, but
Yeah.
Dorothy is like, no. And she grabs a bucket of water that some fired with that this if the witch survived that Winky would have been fired for leaving that water out. But
Yep.
she dumps it on her and she melts. And as a kid, I thought this was a long sequence, but this is so fast.
Yeah, it is.
She's just like, who'd have thought a beautiful little girl like you would destroy my beautiful wickedness? And she just melts.
Yep.
Um, and Dorothy's like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't mean to do another
I
murder."
killed someone else.
And
And they're
This, you
like,
know what? You know what? I'm starting to think that Gulch lady was right. Dorothy's a menace.
she may deserve to be locked up. Inadvertent, but it keeps happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I had a nickel for each time this girl accidentally killed a witch, I'd have two nickels. It's a
Makes
lot, but
10
it's weird that it
cents.
happened
That happened
twice.
twice.
But everyone seems to like it. They're like, "Oh, you saved us. We were enslaved. Thank you." There is a cut reprise of Ding Dong the Witch is Dead,
Mm,
as they're set off. But let's do a check-in with the book, because this is kind of the part where the it starts to really get different. Is
Hmm.
the Wicked Witch of the West stuff, because they haven't been building her up all this time like they have in the movie. So in the book, Winky Country is yellow, like that's their color. They wear yellow. The witch has one eye that has telescope powers. She famously likes to enslave people. They're like, she's gonna enslave you. If she finds
mm,
you, she'll enslave you. And she wants the power of the silver shoes. So she sends wolves and bees to get them, including Barry B. Benson from the Bee Movie.
uh-huh.
Uh, they're
You like
killed
jazz?
by,
Of
yeah,
course
they
he
do
would.
like jazz.
Last words.
You like jazz?
And the Tin Woodman is like, only the jitterbug, and kills him. He's like, Renee Zellweger deserved better. There's some crows that are beaten off by the scarecrow, and the Winkies are scared off by the lion. So the witch is like, okay, let me get out my magical cap and go like eek, op, orp, ah, ah, which is the song from the Jetsons movie, but like I don't remember the chant from the book, or it's longer. And it controls the flying monkey. She can use it 3 times, and her first wish was to drive out the wizard, and her second wish was to take over Winky Country. So she's used a couple times. She's like, I gotta get these people because she wants the lion to do work for her. She's not really
Mm,
threatened by them trying to kill her. Um, so they go the flying monkeys scatter the scarecrow and the Tin Woodman like over miles and miles, like dumping their body parts. And they capture Dorothy and the lion, and she's trying to starve the lion into submission.
this
Uh,
is a children's book.
yes,
Fascinating.
But doesn't Dorothy can sneak out? She sneaks out and feeds
feeds the
him.
lion. Yeah, every night
Yeah.
because Dorothy's in the kitchen because she can't hurt Dorothy because she's protected by the Witch of the North's kiss and the silver shoes. So she can't take the silver shoes off.
Mm.
And that's why the monkeys take her because they're like, well, we can't kill her, but here's this girl. And so she's in the kitchen and she sneaks the lion food. But she's like, this sucks. And the witch is afraid of water because but the only time Dorothy takes off her shoes is to bathe. But so the witch is like, I gotta trick her, and she like trips her and gets her to knock off one of the silver shoes. And she's like, haha, now it's all mine. And you don't even know. There's this whole thing of like, you don't even know the power you have, which is a very interesting theme of like this young girl who doesn't know her power. It's not like the book does a ton with it, but I was like, there's an interesting thing here of this girl has magic that she doesn't know how to use, and there are older people who are trying to manipulate her who know the power she has. Um, but Dorothy is pissed by the witch stealing her shoe, and she's had enough, and she just throws water on her because she's annoyed. And that melts her, and Dorothy's like, "Oh, okay."
Like,
And
thank
she's in a puddle and they sweep her up. They like sweep her up, dump her outside. She's an enslaver, you know?
Yeah.
Uh, the Winkies are free, and they help Dorothy get back the Tin Man and the Scarecrow. And they choose the Tin Woodsman as their new leader. They're like, he's cool. Can he be our king? He's like, yeah. Um, they Dorothy grabs the golden cap when they're like going through the witch's stuff. And she's like, this is
Mhm.
cute. Add this to my inventory. And they go back to get back to the wizard, but they don't really know how to get there because the monkeys took them there.
Mm.
But the Queen of the Field Mice shows up and is like, hey, they hit the tutorial hint button. And the Queen of the Field Mice is like, listen, and explains that the cap controls the monkeys. And so they're like, oh, okay. She summons the monkeys to go to the wizard. And we learn this backstory. We suddenly go to monkey backstory.
Oh, it's so bizarre and like not needed at all.
Yeah, it could literally just be like, oh, the cap controls the monkeys. But they
Yeah.
used to be free until they lived in the land ruled by the princess, good sorceress, Gailete. And then she had trouble finding a man, but eventually she found a guy named Quelala who was just as smart and clever and handsome as her. And she dressed him really nice, and the monkeys threw him in the river as a prank. He was like, haha, that was funny, but she was pissed. She's like, don't come after my man like that. So she puts the curse on them that they're required to obey 3 requests by each owner of the cap. And Quelala was like, hey, I don't have any beef with you. So he just like banished them to the forest.
Hmm.
But later, the Witch of the West gets the cap. That's not explained how. And she uses the cap to force the monkeys to do bad things.
Mm.
But Dorothy can now command them, so they go to the Emerald City. And everyone's freaked out, but they're like, we come in peace. We kill the Witch of the West. Uh, and the wizard is like, oh, wait, now we're back to the book. Or back to the
Movie.
movie.
Yeah.
Um, the wizard, he hears they killed the Wicked Witch of the West, is like, come back tomorrow. And Dorothy's like, oh,
Absolutely.
No.
no, like, this is happening now. Like, I've done a murder now. Like, I have blood on my hands. Like, I'm done. Like, we did everything you asked. She's sick of this. And Toto,
Yeah, no, that one definitely is murder because she knew that they would have to kill her to get the broom. So
yeah,
she committed
she,
manslaughter and then committed a murder.
yeah. To be fair, if there's a witch who's trying to kill me and they're like, well, the only way for you to get home is to kill her, that might be a risk I'd be willing to take.
But the witch was also trying to kill Dorothy, so it's
So
Yeah.
still
self-defense.
self-defense.
Yeah. She was trying,
Your Honor.
the witch was trying to murder the scarecrow and everyone and make her watch.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's
true.
like
So
when, what were you gonna say?
it's justified. What she
It's
did is
justified.
justified.
Yeah, it's like when those women who are being like trafficked kill the person trafficking them and people try and send them to prison. It's like, what else are they supposed to do?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they gotta get free.
Yeah. Um,
They did.
so the wizard, Toto exposes the wizard for being a fraud. His clothes are on. Toto rips down the curtain, and they're like, "There's a man behind the curtain." He's like, "Pay no attention to the man
The
behind the
man behind the
curtain."
curtain.
Famous
Pulling all that.
line. He's pulling all his gizmos and gadgets,
Uh-huh.
aplenty, and but they're exposed, and they're like, "Okay, so you're the wizard. This is fake." And he's like, yeah, I don't know. I just landed here. People thought I was a wizard, so I just did all this. I'm a humbug. And they're like, you're a very bad wizard. He's like, yeah, but I'm a good man. I'm like, I don't think I believe that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. This is I think the reason people want to talk about the political allegories of Oz is because he's such a great representation for most politicians.
Hmm.
Right.
He's like, I'm good. I'm a good leader, but it's like, but you still lied to everyone.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he's like, well, Scarecrow, here's a diploma. I printed it off online. You have brains. You don't need it. Okay, here's a weird heart locket, Tin Man. It's a heart. And then he gives the lion a medal. He's like, a medal means that you're brave. And I do like the theme that like they had what they needed all along.
Right.
But
Right.
Dorothy's like, there's nothing in that bag of tricks for me. He's like, no, but I guess I did arrive here on balloon. I guess I'm done being a dictator. Let's go
We can go
back.
back.
Yeah. And so she's like, yay. They're all celebrating his departure. He's like, oh, I gotta talk with the other wizards in the sky. Uh, a liar to the end. But Toto sees a
Hmm.
cat. Girl, get a leash.
Moral
And
of the story.
yeah, and so she's stuck because it starts flying off, and she's stuck in Oz. And she's devastated. She's like, "How am I gonna get home now?" I feel safer for her because I would not want her alone on a balloon with that man.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Professor Marvel,
Yes.
sure.
Sure.
I mean,
He lied
morally,
for good.
yeah, morally dubious, but he's like, I just don't want this little girl to be like lost trying to live with strangers.
Yep.
Hmm.
Like, good guy. Wizard says he's a good guy, but I don't know if I buy it.
Mm-mm.
And this is where you'll like to connect back with the book. He talks about when he's exposed as a fraud that he had the Emerald City built and he makes them wear glasses so they think it's green. And he is hiding from the Wicked Witches because they have real magic.
Mm.
And he's like, but I'm a good ruler. There's stuff about him doing a violent takeover in some other books, I think, but we'll talk more about Oz in the future, and we'll touch on that. But it is such a great thing where it's like the women have the real power, and the male ruler is just a fraud.
Hmm.
Uh, and he stuffs the scarecrow's head with like fake brains made from pins and needles mixed with
Yeah.
bran flakes. He cuts a hole in the tin woman's body to insert a silk and sawdust heart. And he gives the Cowardly Lion some green liquid from Legend of Zelda to fill him with courage. And he's like, great. And he's like, it's just like he admits it's like placebo. Um, Scarecrow's chosen as the next ruler.
Hmm.
They like him a lot. Uh, and after the wizard leaves, Dorothy summons the monkeys, and they're like, sorry, we can't take you. Looks like you used a wish. And Oz is surrounded by an impassable desert. We can't get around it.
Mm.
So back to the movie. They're still on the platform. She's sobbing. Glinda bubbles in. And she's like, "Oh, you've had the power to go home all along."
You fucking bitch. You could have told me that in the beginning.
This movie
That's
rapidly
how
falls
I
apart.
feel every time. I'm like, you are so conniving. Oh,
She wanted those witches gone. The witch, the
yeah.
wizard, everyone else in power is
Hmm.
gone.
She's consolidating power.
Yeah.
Yes, she
She's
is.
making Dorothy a war criminal and, taking all of the power instead.
Yes. And her hands perfectly clean.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Glinda is using Dorothy as her Project 2025 or whatever.
Yes. Ah.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
she's a child.
she's a child. So they can't even be that mad at Dorothy.
Hmm.
Yeah, so this is where the movie just kind of starts rapidly, not
Wrapping up.
falling apart, because it's still a classic movie that like I love, but it is
Yeah,
also where I'm like, there had to be a better way. Had to be a better way to close
right.
this up. She's got the power all along. You wouldn't have believed me. Just click your heels together 3 times, say there's no place like home. And she says goodbye to her friends. She'll miss Scarecrow most of all. Classic, but this is gives me the belief that Dorothy is in middle school because choosing a
Hmm.
favorite friend in front of all your other friends
Yeah.
is very middle school energy.
Yeah.
Mm,
Which is why, as a kid, I didn't like to say I had a best friend because I felt like that'd be rude to my other
Other
friends.
friends.
yeah.
But then as I'm older, I realized, oh, you can just have multiple best friends.
Yep. Yeah.
Uh,
But I do love that fun fact about you that you thought very deeply about why you wouldn't ever say someone was your best friend. I think that's very sweet.
because otherwise it's like Tin Man and Scarecrow and Lion sitting there like, oh, well,
Like,
fuck me, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
My heart's breaking, my brand new heart. But okay, Scarecrow's the best. It's just because you got to him first. You had extra 10 minutes.
yeah. It was the
So
extended dance break. That's what it was.
he had the dance
Mhm.
break.
It was the dance break.
There was a romance hinted at in one draft between the farmhand and Dorothy that was
Mm,
cut, and thank God because those are like all very much adult men, and
yeah.
she's a teenager at best. So every once in a
Yeah.
while they make like a cut to a movie, like if you look at the potential names for Seven Dwarves, and you're like, wow, they saved themselves so hard there by not going down that road. Like, wow, this movie
Uh,
would have been buried. Uh, so she's had the power all along. I know there's a famous Mad TV sketch Which in hindsight, a lot of those jokes are very dated, but the joke which is like you came down in a bubble, I would have believed anything you said. It's just like, why did you wait, Belinda? She goes home. She's like, oh, I learned I had a dream and you were there. And I learned if I were ever to look for my heart's desire, I won't look further than my own backyard. It's I love how it doesn't fit a hero's journey because Dorothy basically learned this before the tornado hit, that she didn't want Aunt Em to have a heart attack and die. But I guess it's just like Oz was traumatic, so it like really enforced the message.
Right.
Mhm.
Do I even agree with that message? It just
I don't
feels
know.
like the message isn't that's not what they had to say it because the movie wasn't giving me that.
Yeah.
Right.
Uh there's no
It's
place like home
it's
is
very it's giving what's his name? The French guy, Charlie.
Charles Perrault.
It's very Perot. It's like, and here's the moral I want you to walk away with. Women are terrible. It's like,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you, Charlie. Bye.
Yeah, like if Bluebeard's wife just wasn't as curious, she would have been happy married to her serial killer husband. And you're like,
Exactly.
what? That's what you got from this?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like here's a quick moral. We needed a message, I guess. I mean, I think as a kid, that's the point where I was like ready for it to be done. So I was just like, great,
Like,
yay, I
nah.
love this.
Let's
Yeah.
restart the VHS.
Yeah.
Then I'd be at grandma's house and she'd put sprinkles on my bagel with cream cheese, which sounds horrendous, but that was so exciting. And then I would run around her backyard pretending I was in Oz.
Okay, but counter the everything but the bagel seasoning is just adult sprinkles to put on your bagel. So
Yeah,
Savory sprinkles.
you were onto something.
that's onto something. Shout out to Barbara. She knew the
Shout out to
trends.
Barbara.
Um, okay, so the book. This is like where we really deviate.
The book is like at this point, as someone who's seen the movie so many times and has read the book before, I'm like, okay, wait a minute, what's happening? Because then Glinda's not in Emerald City. Like she does not bubble in. She doesn't bubble in
Anywhere.
anywhere. She's just like an old lady. And so they said, like, well, we got to go back to Glinda. So they start journeying and they come upon the land of the China dolls. I don't know how like, what is it even called?
It's yeah, like China country. So the realm
Yeah.
of China people. The first they fight some trees, which they put in the movie in a different spot.
Oh yeah,
Then
I
they
totally
they end up in Chinatown or
know that.
there's Jack
Well,
Giddy's is nowhere in sight.
They're like everything, like the ground is made of porcelain, and all of the people that live there are basically tiny, tiny little porcelain doll people who talk and go about their merry way.
But they hate getting broken and they get
Right.
scared by them and get broken and then they have to go to the get fixed. And like when we get fixed, it reduces our value. We're not
Yeah,
as
we're not as
pretty.
beautiful. They're like, look at that guy. He's been broken so many times and he's not as good looking
And it's
anymore.
like a clown, yeah.
Yeah.
God.
And there's this China princess and Dorothy. There's a lot of people who've read a lot of very sapphic readings of Dorothy in various versions, and she's just like, "Oh, you're so pretty. I want to take you home, put you on Aunt M's shelf." And the China girl's like, "Yeah, but outside of China country, I just turn into a little doodad that's on a shelf. I want to be a person." And she's like, "Oh, okay. Well, that'd be awful to do to you. I'll leave you here." And they
Okay.
do break a China church on accident, which is the only reference to religion in the series. Uh,
Huh.
and they leave. But that China princess does appear in animated Lee Michelle Wizard of Oz movie,
Yes. And
played by Megan Hilty.
there's
Ah,
also one of the like school adaptations of The Wizard of Oz. Like my brother did one called Oz. He played Oz.
Oz,
And
fun,
congrats on the title role.
yeah,
yes, it was exciting for my brother when he was in the seventh grade. And so, but there is a whole like portion of that is the China, like there's the porcelain doll character, and like they go, but it's earlier in it. Like it's like one
yeah.
of the sort of things that they go through. And I always thought that was so weird that like that was included in, but it was not a royalty-free version, but it was kind of like that, where like it is more,
Yeah.
it was more book-based. But that was always the part when I was a kid. I was like, what is this part? I don't remember this from the movie.
Yeah, and the China doll I think also features in the what's his face? Uh Sexual harasser.
Oh, James
Is.
Franco.
James Franco.
Yeah.
James Franco's there's a China doll
Oz
character
movie.
in Oz the Great and Terrible, which is a movie I did like when I saw, which is
I
embarrassing to
did
admit, but
too.
you know, I liked
But now
Nickelback
that
when
we
I
have
was
the
a
Wicked
kid.
movie, it's like,
Who needs it?
who needs it?
I did always hate the backstory they give to the Witch of the West. We'll have to cover that movie at some point, but I always hated that backstory they gave her. I was like,
Yeah.
this is
And
a
then
crime.
what's her face?
Mila Kunis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, okay, so they come on upon a council of animals, and they're like, "There's a giant spider." Sheila from Lord of the Rings is doing some work in the woods. Lion defeats the giant spider, becomes king of the forest. So now Dorothy's friends all have little kingdoms.
They have jobs. They're
They have
employed.
jobs. They're employed. Everyone's got to work in Oz. There's hammerheads blocking their way. They're guys with long necks and no arms. Dorothy uses her final flying monkey wish to to get past them. Arrive in Quadling Country, Glinda's land. Everyone wears red. They stay at a farmer's house and eat. Important detail. Glinda lives in a castle of all girls. She's this beautiful lady with like her like it's basically Barbie land. Uh, and she's like, "Oh, you have these shoes. They have a charm. They can get you home. They can get you anywhere in the world." So Glinda knew the power because she's the most powerful of all the witches. But she hadn't met Glinda before. It's not like Glinda was withholding.
Mm.
And Dorothy, there's this detail where Dorothy bemoans that she's gone so long. Aunt Em will have to go into mourning and wear black. And with the poor harvest, Uncle Henry can't afford to have Aunt Em in mourning.
Mm.
Which is really sad. This poor child thinking about like her starving family. And we think of MAGA and Make America Great Again. I think like America was rough.
Yeah, we don't need to go back there.
Yeah.
No.
People
I,
were
mm-mm.
dying, Kim. And Glinda's like, okay, well, let me use the monkey cap to get your friends home and then give it back to the monkey so they can be free. Because I kept waiting for Dorothy to do that, but that's Glinda's
Mm.
decision.
Hmm.
She's a kind of girl boss. And she sends, so Dorothy goes home, uh, and she's happy that at least because she was there, she made all her friends' lives better. The lion and the woodsman and the scarecrow. The silver shoes fly off as she flies home, but she greets Aunt Em, and Aunt Em's so happy to see her, is hugging her, kissing her, and she's usually a stoic lady. And she's like, "Where'd you come from?" Dorothy's like, "From the land of Oz, and here's Toto too, and oh, Aunt Em, I'm so glad to be home again." End book.
Wow.
Uh, wow. Oz is wild. I love the wildness of it. That like
Yeah.
it's one of those things that because we're so used to it, we're like, yeah, that's what happens. But like to step back with fresh eyes, you're kind of like,
You're like,
What?
oh, I forgot about that. Yeah.
yeah. But the songs, how do we feel about the music of this?
Amazing.
Amazing. Incredible.
Classic.
So good. It's
Okay.
just like, yeah, it's so good.
Somewhere Over the Rainbow really is the standout.
Hmm.
It
Mm.
is like it's a really powerful song. And then the music's great and the visuals. Like even
Yeah.
though Oz is kind of set up, it feels like you're watching a play. It's like
Hmm.
Hmm.
somehow the artificiality of it makes it more believable.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Like that this is like a storybook, but yeah, it's a storybook and these characters all live in a storybook world.
Hmm.
That's how I felt about Brandy Cinderella. It's like it looks so much like a soundstage that like it like encapsulates itself in a storybook. And I feel the same way. Like I can tell this is a soundstage, but
Hmm.
like there's something kind of magical and storybook like about that.
All of I mean, I'm looking at your background now too, Hannah, but like all of the drop like painted
Yeah.
backdrops
Yeah.
are actually I have a book downstairs of like Hollywood backdrops. And of course the cover of it is The Wizard of Oz
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they're all the most like sumptuously beautiful backdrops that just, you're on a soundstage and like obviously it's sort of cartoony, but like just it gives you so much depth, obviously. Like
Yeah.
that's looking at it, but it really keeps you in the world even all these years later. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
not distractingly like primitive
Mm-mm.
film, you know?
Yeah. You know, it's and just the beauty of the Technicolor
Hmm.
that is something like I love about like this era of movie, like that just
Hmm.
sumptuousness.
Hmm.
Because I think we're slowly finally escaping it, but there was really like especially fantasy went through a really drab era,
Yeah.
and it's like color,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. And it fits Oz. I think this movie, if we talk about like as an adaptation, I think it's such a solid adaptation, and I think Oz is as relevant as it is today because of this movie.
Mm.
Hmm. I
Like,
mean, it taps into like everybody's like most basic desire is something better, right? That's
yeah,
what you search your whole life for is just something better than what you currently have, by daydreaming. And that's all Oz really is Dorothy's daydream to get out of this horrible, sad, depressing Kansas she lives in. And it's like the most, everybody relates to Oz and like wanting to go somewhere over the rainbow. Like it is the
yeah,
most personal thing. You want something better for yourself. And I feel like it will give this movie and this story just staying power forever because it is the most basic human want.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I felt this when they filmed Wicked in the UK. Is that meme of everything's for you. This is our one thing. Because I feel like the UK has Narnia, Middle Earth, Wonderland, Neverland, and we're like
Yeah.
Oz is America's one thing.
Yeah. Like you couldn't have
We
filmed it here.
yeah, we got
We
Oz as
have
our
Kansas.
we have one fantasy world that's like I know
Yeah.
there's more, but like our that's like an iconic fairy tale like generational thing, and I think this movie is why, and I think why things like Wicked have so many layers to them, and why it's like because Wicked is an adaptation of a musical adaptation of a book based on this movie and the book that was based on that, and there's a Broadway show in between, and like it's
Yeah.
just there's so much to and each time the World of Oz kind of grows with us and
Hmm.
adds new layers.
Hmm.
And I mean, when we talk about Wicked, which spoilers, if you can guess, that's our next episode. We'll get into how I think like Wicked is peak of its genre of like villain origin story slash fairy tale retellings, and part of that is because the events of Oz lend itself to exploring better than I think people think. Okay, we can do that with any story, and not every villain has the same room that the Wicked Witch of the West gives us. But speaking of characters, I mean, how do we think of the Wicked Witch as our antagonist?
I mean, she's scary as hell.
Yeah.
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 She's the
She,
witch.
She's
yes.
the witch.
Yeah.
That witch. Like every other, like, sorry, Agatha, I love you, but
But
yeah.
it was the Wicked Witch of the West all along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think the wizard really is an antagonist too. I know he's kind of played as like bumbling and kindly, but
No.
he's
He does
lying.
know what he's doing. Like he didn't, trip and fall and all of a sudden is the ruler of Oz. Like it may have been, oh, I didn't know what I was doing, but like you never stopped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had them build a city.
Yeah. And your
Uh,
mechanical face.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you sent a teenage girl to do a murder. That's a
Yeah.
big yikes
To
for
do a
me.
crime, to do a
That's
murder.
yeah, that's a no from me,
You
dog.
you picked a child as a hitman.
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
A child and three, a lion, a tin man, and a scarecrow. So no records, no papers,
Hmm.
nothing will happen if they go missing. No one's looking for them because her parents
Hmm.
are in a different world.
Yeah.
Diabolical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But our hero, I think, how do we feel? I feel like Dorothy as a protagonist is so spunky and relatable.
Mm.
She is very old classic, like, oh no, I'm scared, but I'm like, I we do.
Yeah. And me too, of course. Of course. She's so, I mean, I feel like she's so vulnerable, but also like she's a very much like an everyman kind of,
Yeah,
like
Mm.
she's not too, um, I don't know. I feel she's relatable to everyone. She does stick up for herself and she sticks up for her friends and she wants to be with her family, but Um, she's just so wonderfully naive and so vulnerable that you can't help but relate to her, you know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And she doesn't realize the power she has,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
And she's kind, she sticks up for others, and she's also very real. She has the animals of vulnerability, right? So that like she can't be like nothing will get me to bow to you, witch. She's like, no, my dog, like
Yeah.
I will.
Yeah.
Like she's like, please no. She's just very she has very realistic reactions. And I do miss, we talked about that, like, I think, like, all the way back in, like, Black Cauldron and in general, like, the pre-Marvelification of fantasy characters, like,
Mm,
even Frodo's, even, like, your Disney, your older Disney princesses, like, pre-Elsa, you know, or pre-Rapunzel, like, they like kids in Narnia, like they don't have any special skills. They're not like they don't have any superpowers. They're just like
mm,
a group of idiots, like trying to survive, doing their best. And I think that lets kids relate because they're like, I could be Dorothy. You know,
hmm.
like
Hmm.
Dorothy doesn't have ice powers, but I love Elsa. Like I'm not, this isn't the Ran on Elsa parade, but like, oh, like that could be me. I could still find a way to escape the evil witch, even though I'm just a kid.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's why this movie has staying power, even though the themes to me, I'm like, okay, if that's what you got, filmmakers. But I guess that leads us to our big question. Hannah, was that your fantasy?
Yes, this is my fantasy. It was wonderful to come back to this movie. I don't remember the last time I even watched it. And I think as a kid, like I didn't appreciate it as much because we've talked about it before. My favorite movies as a kid was like Aladdin, Little Mermaid. Like I had very specific expectations of what a plot should be. And this movie doesn't really fit into those, like we talked about. There's a lot more wandering going on, and our character's arc isn't as well defined. But I think as an adult, I'm able to appreciate it more in the sense of, like you said, like that's sort of freeing, but also just like from a technical and craftsman point of view, that it's just like it looks so good. And there's something really not really nostalgic, but it's just like kind of like quaint about the acting style then too. It's also like a very different type of style, more vaudeville type.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of nice to revisit. And then yeah, I think I'd hang out in Oz for a little while. I would very much be a Dorothy. I don't have any special skills. But I consider myself to be kind. So yeah. And I have a dog and two cats. So, I could bring everyone along.
So Jenna, A, did you like the movie? And B, is this like an adventure you want to live out?
I mean, yes and yes.
I feel like we can guess your answers, but
I mean,
please take us.
yes and yes. I mean, I think for me personally, this has been a touchstone my entire life. Like I said, I do not remember the first time I watched this movie because I've seen it so many times. And like as a child, you know how some kids are about Elsa. I was about Dorothy. Like I had
Yeah.
the dress, I had the shoes at 3. Like this has been, for better or worse, my personal touchstone my entire life.
Who can say if you've been changed for the better,
I have been
but
changed
you've been
for
changed
good.
for good. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say yes, this is my fantasy. And I mean, obviously there are times where I've had movies surpass it as my favorite movie of the time, but I always do come back to this one.
There's no
As
place
a
like
kid,
home.
I always identified as with Dorothy and when as a child of divorce, you get it's a very you always in your mind you want to escape, right? Like and this is the ultimate escape.
Yeah.
Um like a Six Flags. And, but yeah, I would say this is my fantasy. I think, as an adult, I've tried to watch other things like Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings and everything like that. And I think I just prefer more simple world building from a fantasy perspective. Like if I open a book and it's got like 4 pages of maps, I'm like, I can't do this. Like, this is this is way too much for me. Like that's my husband loves that. Like that's his kind of, he's a big fantasy kind of guy. And for me, I'm like, dumb it down. Like I need really simple terms.
You can
Um,
give me a square country with 5 sections and they're all color
quadrants.
coded.
That's all I
Yeah.
need. I think for me that is truly like, yeah, I would love to venture beyond it, but why venture beyond my own backyard, as Dorothy says.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Hannah's
But
got a
yes, I will
scarecrow on
say,
hers. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, I will say this is my fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, yes and yes for me. This like I realized I had not watched this movie since I was a kid, and I hadn't watched it in a long time. And the first I like asked my mom when like we had like where I was watching this and I like was crying listening to the audiobook on the way home from the election when Dorothy or like the morning of the election, like Dorothy gets home and I'm like she loves her Aunt Em so much. And I'm like, when did I just always like it? I feel like I always remember seeing it. And she's like, yeah, I don't remember when you first saw it. You always did. You always liked Wizard of Oz. And
Mhm.
going back to it, like some things as a kid, you like, and you go back and you're like, eh. But Wizard of Oz, I'm like, yeah, I had taste. I was a child of taste. This movie's quality, and I think Dorothy is such a great character and is a reason why like so much has been built on this legacy. I love Oz, and yeah, I would want to go on this. I think I could handle this adventure. The Wicked Witch would be scary, but like I have friends, like I think I don't have to like be good at combat.
Mhm.
Like, hey,
True.
I have those few semesters of fencing, and I don't need anything more than that. You
Well, you
know,
could use a bucket of water or a
use a
squirt
bucket of
bottle.
water.
And
Yeah,
the scarecrow does have a gun,
he does
so
have a gun. Yeah. All I need to be is good at making friends, which I can do.
yeah.
Mhm.
So Jenna, if people are trying to find you on social media, if you have anything you want to plug, do you want to plug anything?
I'm so like not in that world. I'm a retired improviser. I'm now like a suburban mom. But I
You're
do,
improvising in a different kind of way.
yeah. I'm improvising by just joining podcasts as a guest all the time. You could go and listen to Glee Aggressive, which is hosted
Yeah.
by my friends Ian and Karina, and I've been their Kristen Chenoweth correspondent for
Love
several.
it.
But I do, it's funny. My Instagram is probably private because I'm afraid of being perceived. And my TikTok is, what is it? It's at Jenna Kate Monosoff on TikTok. I've made maybe 10 of them. I just literally made one today about the story I told you guys about the meeting the Munchkin actors because I include a video of the parade and it's but the floats that they're on because it was 1999, they put one of them on a rocket and it says the parade float says Margaret flies into the new millennium.
Wow.
It's so good. She
A
loves it.
time
You
capsule.
have to, it's genuinely, I feel like I need to like put these home videos on YouTube of this parade because every one of them has a very specialty float. But Margaret's is the best, and she's literally like this.
I
She's
love it.
her best life. But yeah, so you can find me there. I usually post about that or I post about running because running is my other personality. That's I guess the podcast I'm a guest on is Glee Aggressive, so go find me there.
Great
Yeah.
show, quality show. We've been on it a couple times.
Yeah.
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 Hannah, where can you find us? Other
Oh
than
gosh.
obviously looking to the Western sky. If you care to
Yes.
find me, you look to the Western sky. But where can you find the pod?
Let's see if I can remember. We are on Instagram and TikTok at Not My Fantasy Pod. And if you are on iTunes or Spotify listening to us, give us a great rating, 5 stars, and let us know in your little review comment what you love about the podcast. This will help us climb the chart so other people can find us. We can find other awesome listeners just like you. If you are on YouTube, hi, hello. You can
Smash that like button.
smash the like button, hit the
Like
subscribe
that
button.
witch got smashed by that house.
Exactly. You got crush the like button. Uh
And hit that ding dong, the witch is dead bell notification. So you get notifications each time we
exactly.
post a video.
And subscribe so that you get notified anytime that we post a new video episode. Next week is Wicked Part 1. Part
Yeah.
1, the movie Part 1. We're not doing a multi-part
I mean,
episode on the
we
first part of Wicked.
we
We probably
could,
could.
but that is not the plan.
I'm tired. We have to do Moana 2
Oh yeah,
in some sort of holiday movie still, and the year is coming to a close.
I know.
Crazy. But I guess if you're on YouTube, you can leave an amazing comment about what are your favorite memories of this movie. You know, like, do you remember the first time you saw it, or do you have just like any sort of favorite movies?
Favorite
Do you have a favorite
part?
song? Yeah.
Yeah. And
Do
and
you
talk
are you
about
scared of the monkeys? Me too.
yeah, scared of the monkeys. And how were you feeling when Margaret was flying into the new millennium? Where were you?
Where were you? Were you
Where
even
were
born?
yeah.
So- oh
Yeah.
gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? If you want to find me somewhere over the rainbow, you can follow me on Cullen Ever After. I haven't plugged my Instagram in a minute.
So long.
I know,
Yeah.
but I re-listened to an old episode. I think I listened to our history of Halloween around Halloween because like I want to remember that one when I was drinking a Cutwater, being a little too drunk. And that's my Instagram. I used to plug it. I'm plugging it again.
Look at that.
Yeah, maybe I'll post a picture of me at the quinceanera.
There you go.
Content to look forward to. Jenna, thank you so much for coming on
Yes.
for a
Thank you.
friend of a friend's podcast. It's so sweet of you, but you're the perfect guest. Thank you so much.
It's the honor of a lifetime to talk about the Wizard of Oz for 2.5 hours. I get joy about nothing else.
So glad to be part of that joy. And I mean, it's got to be true if your friend is like, I know somebody who you should have on your podcast to talk about Wizard of
Like,
Oz.
Jenna hasn't shut up about the Wizard of Oz since I met her 12 years ago.
Amazing.
And that tune in
Next episode.
next episode, the Merry Old Land of Oz. Ain't so merry, and we will ask: are some people born wicked? Do they have wickedness thrust upon them?
That is the question.
That is the question. Bye,
All right.
listeners.
Bye, listeners.
Bye.